Schools today at 4:36. I'll turn it over to the clerk for roll call.
Member Banks.
Here.
Chair Dirk Eater.
Here.
Member Loeffler-Kemp. Here. Vice Chair Lofold.
Here.
I'm Clerk Mixel. I am here. Treasurer Sadowski.
Here.
Member Williams is excused. Superintendent Magus.
Present.
Assistant Superintendent Bonds. Present. Deputy Clerk Zunich.
Present.
And Executive Assistant Brown. Here. Roll call is complete.
Thank you. I'd now like to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Bonds for the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, and good evening, board, and good evening, everyone who is with us. I would like to start off by saying we have a full agenda, which I really appreciate. I want to say in advance to all of our presenters, thank you for getting all the presentations ready and just being mindful of how robust of an agenda that we have. And just wanted to say thank you, though, for all of your work in all sincerity. So first up, let's bring up our first presentation. We have several individuals with us. They can introduce themselves in terms of their roles in a minute. We have Gretchen Karg, Julie Stauber, and Dale Usman. They are here to present for us today the 25-26 local literacy report. It may say plan, but it's more of a report. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Usman.
That was technology. So.
Yes, for the record. Let that show in the minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm here with Gretchen and Julie to present our annual submission of the local literacy plan. As Assistant Superintendent Bonds already said, it really is more of a report than it is a plan. It's helpful for you all to know, as well as the public who may be listening, that by state statute, we as a district are required to submit the local literacy plan by June 15th and then post it to the district website. Over the past few years that I've been watching the local literacy plans, it really has changed, and it, as you probably saw as you were reviewing it, it very much reads like a form now. So we have been talking about how it really is the local literacy report as opposed to a plan. So our process is that MDE gives us a very long form with lots of things to fill out. Some of those things being student performance toward the READ Act goal, student screening for characteristics of dyslexia, progress toward READ Act PD requirements, and how we used our literacy aid fund. It's a little bit different this year. You didn't get a very nice PDF copy. You probably saw it looked a little bit messy. We're waiting on MDE because this year our guidance is to submit the form and then they will come back to us with a really nice PDF layout. However, that really nice PDF layout isn't ready for us yet from MDE, so we're just waiting on that, and we'll have a cleaner version of this PDF to put on the website. I'll turn it over to you.
I'm Gretchen Karg, the literacy lead, and I'm going to speak towards the actions we took this year towards our literacy goal. So our literacy goal is to meet the READ Act goal of every Minnesota child reading at or above grade level, starting in kindergarten. And changes that we did this year, moving towards that goal, was we expanded the universal screening up to 12th grade. But previously it was kindergarten through 3rd grade. Was required through the READ Act. We also trained hundreds of paraprofessionals in structured literacy practices so they can support our classroom teachers. And we began our STRIVE training for our secondary ELA teachers and administrators. We have also received new guidance from MDE on integrating more multisyllabic decoding, morphology, and vocabulary instruction in all of our teaching, including secondary classrooms. Many of our phase 1 teachers have now completed. We have less than 70 left to finish that phase 1 training that was with letters. We made gains this year in pre-K through second grade on all of our screening. We don't have the MCA4 results back yet. So this was the first year of the MCA4, a new version of the MCA tests, and we will get those results in the fall to see how things went for our third grade through 10th graders this year. Also, as Dale mentioned, that was a long form that we had to fill out online, and we noticed an error today when we went back and looked at it. So if you have a printed copy of the form, if you're reading about the section 14, about the dual language immersion program, there was a misprint with the numbers. So, and we're working on it. We'll be able to resubmit it with the correct numbers. That was a new part of the plan this year too, was to report more in depth on our dual language immersion programs and how we're meeting those students' needs. So I also prepared a slide to talk to you about the funding that we get to support all the initiatives for the READ Act. So there were some streams of funding that are not available to us anymore, but we do have some of those dollars still in reserve. We are continue to get the literacy incentive aid, and we used about a third of that so far this year, and we are able to allocate it in our remaining fiscal year to use those funds up by the end of June.
Okay, so you have heard that the local literacy plan is more of a report. They do ask, however, what is our plan moving forward? Did we make some changes to our plan, to our report moving forward? So there's a little bit of a, what's your plan how's it changing for the future? And the biggest thing is the phase 2 training for our secondary teachers. That has begun. It began in May. It's going to continue. As Gretchen mentioned, the MCA4 is new. So there's going to be a lot of learning for that, 6, 7, 8, and then 10th grade. Those are all new MCA4s. Another new thing that we're working on is oral language screening for K2, as well as ROAR screening. ROAR stands for Rapid Online Assessment in Reading. That we do a gated approach with our screening. So ROAR is a quick screener to see which students are reading at grade level proficiency. And if they are not, then those students that are not at grade level will then be tested with the CAPTE Read Basics, which is part of the READ Act requirement. Another thing that is changing, we are looking at Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions and progress monitoring for secondary sites, which middle school has been doing some of that, but now our high school will be working on that. And then we are also looking at some rewards is a curriculum for intervention, as well as advanced word study. We're bringing that into the secondary schools as well. So those were some changes that we are started making this year and that will continue in the future.
We kept it brief, but what questions do you have for us? I know that you have a copy of the plan as well as a copy of our slides.
Superintendent Magus.
I just want to say thanks to you as a team and really appreciate the work you're doing around literacy. I think we all agree that literacy is a foundation to education, and the changes we've made as a district are really phenomenal. And I think hearing about these next steps and where we've been and where we're going is incredibly wonderful. And Gretchen, I want to say thank you for your service to the district. I know you're stepping away for other things, but just want to say that we appreciate the service to the district and your leadership.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be here.
Eric Eater, and then Member Lawful Kemp.
Since we have all the literacy, our leaders in literacy in the building, I just found it was an interesting word choice for you all, and so I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. When you said Duluth Public Schools will make incremental process, I just find that's an interesting word to use, like small progress. Like what are your thoughts as to how we move towards the READ Act and where we're at and how we're doing?
Well, I think we hear this guidance from our training that we're in and from MDE that unfortunately the changes don't happen overnight.
Yeah.
It's system change. And, if we have a kiddo in fourth grade who maybe hasn't had all the same structured literacy in those formative years, that change isn't going to happen at the same rate.
So you're talking about across the district. It'll look very different for us with our little kinders who've started out for this versus like my son who started out
Right.
and is now in 11th grade because he has dyslexia, as I've shared. And so that was a huge, huge, huge challenge for us moving forward. So
Yeah.
I always have to lift up the new focus on dyslexia and dysgraphia for kids because it's hugely helpful. But I just found that interesting, and framing it in terms of the spectrum of kids who've been exposed to the READ Act now makes sense with the word like incremental. But I was looking at this and I was like, I wonder what that means. So,
To explain too, our preschool made incredible growth this year.
Yeah.
So did kindergarten, so.
I'm just
It's
thrilled about
happening.
it. So thank you so much, and thank you for your service.
Kemp?
Thank you. And yeah, I share what Superintendent Magus said too about the gratitude for all the work that put into this plan. And I just had two quick things. One is I appreciated you including the literacy aid funds and particularly the uses it will be for it so that people kind of better understood that. So thank you. And then under the changes for next year, I was just curious if you could share, and again, maybe more for the public, where you talk about implementing Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions and progress monitoring in the high schools. And like, what would progress monitoring look like, just again, so people better understand how we monitor?
We do have access to more tools like CAPTI Read Basics, which really helps us understand where students are in their level of proficiency when it comes to reading. And our hope is that we can provide, the interventions would be the rewards and the advanced word study. Those are the interventions that MDE has approved as appropriate for our students. And then progress monitoring, we can do that. We can actually use CAPTI Read Basics. One of the tests within that test can be used every 6 to 8 weeks to check to see are kids making progress based on the work that they're doing within the class, based on everything that the teacher is providing, the extra support that's being provided. Are students making any progress? And we can use that CAPTI Read Basics to do that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much.
Can we go back to page 6 and just kind of review that literacy aid funds? And just, again, for me, but sometimes it helps our community as well, just kind of understand. I think I'd be interested in just hearing how incredibly wonderful, positive, and encompassing the aid has already been in these last, would this be our third year of our extensive PD, our extensive training, all in letters? And just where, when we know then that, well, I'm going to let you explain it. When we know the aid is not going to come again, but we have some left over, where do we see our literacy goals, maybe in 3 years? Or do you think aid will come back in some way, shape, or form? Like fall down from heaven?
I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what will happen in 3 years. The aid has gone down, but then our demands for PD is also going down. So we won't have to have that same expense of, reimbursing teachers and doing that. Also, I think it's 87 programs have been approved by MDE for colleges. So students will come to us out of college not needing this training. So we can use those funds that are remaining for intervention programs, for enhanced screening, for providing, professional development that will continue to strengthen teachers' understanding, of what they've learned and help them implement that into the classroom. And we can also use it for positions, staffing.
And the funds that we say, we've spent 1/3 of that, so we have 2/3 left, will last us how long?
Do you feel ready to speak to that, Simone?
I think with the way our budget is sitting right now, that we are going to be utilizing our restricted funds as much as possible. And if it is appropriate and we can utilize them for our needs, we will try and draw down this year, FY '26, and then we'll see what's left over.
One thing that I will add is that we are doing some forward thinking, and I think you were alluding to this, Gretchen. We're approaching, we're going towards phase 2 professional development a little bit differently. We've spent a lot of our funding on stipends and substitutes during phase 1 because we've done all of that professional development outside of professional development days that we have in the district. However, with phase 2 now, all of our phase 2 participants will be participating in their professional development on professional development days. So we no longer will have the cost associated with the stipends or substitute costs.
Thank you.
Yep.
And can I just further that conversation then, if we are recognizing some savings within the 2/3 left over, does that help us? Where does that help us the most? Keeping newer teachers coming into our younger primary grades connected more, or I don't know. I'm just trying to lift up our focus on literacy because we have been for 3 years, and give our community understanding that we're in good shape. Maybe I just said it.
It's a really good question, and I don't have a great answer, but I do think it will allow us to continue to do some of the things that we're doing without having to pull funding from other avenues. Hopefully,
MDE says that a school district must use its literacy aid to meet the requirements and goals adopted in the district's local literacy plan and they state the statute. So we do need to use the funds. Ideally, we don't want to let them sit there from year to year. So we will apply them.
Thank you. Member Sadowski?
I was wondering if you could just say a little bit more about the ROAR test, the Rapid Online Assessment in Reading. I know from having kids in the schools, I've heard about the FAST test in elementary school, but I hadn't heard about the ROAR test in the high school level. And how do we identify students who may benefit from this and who completes it? Just some more information on it.
Well, I do know that the ROAR test is for those districts using the gated approach. ROAR was approved by MDE or recommended by MDE to use as that first step in the gated approach. It is out of the Stanford University, and there are districts in the state using it. And it's a rapid, what is it, 20 minutes?
20 to 30 minutes online.
Yeah, and so, and it is aligned with the science of reading so that it identifies the areas where a student may need where they're doing well and where they may need some extra support. And depending upon how they score with that, if, their level of proficiency is at grade level, then that would be it. That would be the only screening that would be necessary. And then if they're below grade level, then our next step would be to administer the CAPTE Read Basics assessment.
That ROAR is more like a broad brushstroke, of a screener. And then the CAPTE, if a student is below on ROAR, the CAPTE would be more diagnostic.
More specific, like what area.
Great, thank you. That's great to hear that it's a nice rapid test too, so I know our students have a lot going on and a lot of tests. I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I don't know what the gated approach is, so I don't know if you could say in a nutshell what that is.
Gated approach means, well, the READ Act requires that we screen everybody, grades 4 through 12 now.
K through 12.
K through 12. And so the gated approach means but are we using ROAR for 4 through 12? No, we're
No.
using FastBridge still.
Fastbridge for middle school, Roar for 9 through 12.
9 through 12 only. So everybody will be screened in the whole district, all students. And then, so that's the first gate. And then if they pass through that gate, there's no more testing required by the READ Act. If students aren't at a level of proficiency, for their grade level, then they would take the CAPD.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah.
Member Meixel?
Thank you so much for all you're doing for our literacy goals in the district. I was curious, or I was very excited to see that MD, as well as our district, is prioritizing parent notification and involvement and recognizing that we'll be notifying parents of their students. Is it just their scores that they take 2 or 3 times a year? Is that what will be going out to parents? So every parent will receive that information?
Correct. So we are required, it is a READ Act requirement for K through 3 families to be notified of how students do on the screener, and if they are below grade level in reading, what the school is doing to address those needs.
Excellent. And I also see in our plan that we'll also be including strategies that parents and families can use at home to help their student.
Yes.
Are those going to be just universal strategies that everyone receives, or will there also be some more pinpointed strategies if a student happens to test on the lower side?
We have a document with like a menu of activities, and then the actual interventionist or the teacher that's working with the child can pick from that menu.
Oh, perfect.
On what would be specifically helpful for the student.
Great. I'm sure parents will appreciate having that extra layer of support as well, so that they can be helping at home as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no additional lights. So thank you again for all of your work and for presenting tonight. Next up, we have Jen Larva, Director Larva, as well as our Public Information Officer, Dale Wellens. And they will be providing an update related to the student handbook.
Good evening, board members. Jen Larva, Director of Secondary Education.
Dale Wellens, Communications Officer.
So every year I work with the assistant principals and we review the student handbook from the year that we're currently working in. Adele assists me in this. A lot of times we're working on updating policies. She does a lot of the formatting piece, but we take a look at different parts and pieces of the student handbook and let the APs live in the student handbook on a pretty much daily basis. So they're the reason why I use them as a student handbook committee. And they'll let us know like what's really not working, or hey, this was new this year. Can we take a peek at like the language around this? So what you're seeing here is the changes. So a good portion of our student handbook just always it stays the same unless we need to make a change. And so these are the changes that are being made for next year's handbook. We get the changes and then we bring them forward to you. Adele then will be working on the actual production of the handbook. She needs to go through Canva, I think, first before she publishes, or do you use something else?
InDesign.
InDesign, but we work on it through Canva first or something. Okay, whatever it is. But we'll put together the final student handbook for distribution come the fall. But here you can see some of the changes that happen every year. We're always making updates to the directory. When we have like retirements, like Kathy Cush-Marshall left, and so we'll be hiring a Congdon principal, so that that'll be something that'll have to be updated. So you will see the updates to the directory as position shifts. We kind of wait until the very last minute before we have to make those updates as much as possible. We added in how parents are going to be communicated with during our e-learning days so that they know they should be looking at Parent Square for more information. We're changing the terminology from blended learning to digital learning. There's some reasons behind that. I have not yet brought forth policy 624, which is about online learning, but that will be coming next year for sure. There's been some updates at the state level, and there's an actual definition about what blended learning is, and it's not how Duluth has defined blended learning. It is more about being able to offer learning that is a hybrid of being in seats and doing some digital things. And so we wanted to clean that up so that there's no more confusion with that definition that's coming from the state when we get that policy brought to the board. We wanted to clean this up first. We added a little statement about backpacks, just so that it was very clear that students are supposed to be keeping their backpacks in their lockers from first bell to last bell. So that was added in. That was on the suggestion of our APs. We also have added some language around the generative use of artificial intelligence under academic dishonesty. We're seeing a lot of AI use already with our students, and so we wanted to ensure that they were aware of that. We also have a syllabus statement, that we're going to be adding to syllabi throughout the school year as well. So that's just putting it into the handbook so that we have that documented. We have a statement that we added regarding positive student attendance around that 90%. That is what the state defines as being positive student attendance, and how absences need to be reported through the school using their communication tool. So there may be ways that individual sites have parents call in an absence. It could be a call. It could be you leave it on a certain line on a voicemail. It could be through Parent Square. It could be a Google form. We don't know what the communication tool of choice necessarily is for all of them. So we wanted to make sure that it was clear that the school is going to be communicating with them how to do that. We also, when we had changed the policy a while back, we had said that, family trips and stuff, they would be excused if they're arranged in advance. We know that is something that we want families, that we have people who are maybe teachers in other districts. We want them to be able to take their kids. Like, we wouldn't want to say that you can't take your kid when you're on your break from school or something. And so we had agreed through the policy that was written last year, was that policy submitted? That would be excused, but we didn't really have anything in our handbook that reflected that piece. So, we want to have that notification in advance so that it's not like an afterthought, like, oh yeah, we were in Florida for 2 weeks. Yeah, you should have told us in advance so that we would make sure we had what you needed in order to be gone. We added some language for the level 4 incidents so that it would be the consequence. Now I can't remember what it says in front of it because of how it's here.
So originally, for the level 4 incidents, there was no, level 4 is our highest level, so those are our most egregious. There was no language that said that we could also consider expulsion, so we added that to that language because level 4 being our most extreme circumstances, it usually ends up with a recommendation for possible expulsion. So we just added that so that it was clear. And then when it came to the second and third offense of level 3, the APs also wanted to add also and/or consideration for expulsion. It wasn't clear in there. And again, if it's level 3 is our second most egregious, so they're pretty extreme if they're doing it a second or a third time. So that was just to kind of cover our basis for, the handbook doesn't say that you would consider that. So the level 4 one was really just a missed piece that we added, and the level 3 was a suggestion made by the assistant principals. And then with the nicotine delivery systems, we wanted that to be clear to cover vapes or the pouches that are now becoming more popular, anything that has nicotine. So because we felt tobacco wasn't, we had a lot of pushback that tobacco wasn't specific enough for a vape because it's not tobacco. And then for the DTA via their student ID, so that was added because in the handbook, we have a separate section for transportation disciplinary. So it's added there that if you're removed from the bus, you either have to transport, or if you're in grades 6 through 12, that you'll have access to the DTA through your student ID. And then under disciplinary definition, we added a definition with gambling that also adds unapproved sales due to some issues we've had in the district recently. And then we'll update any of the policies that are in the back of the handbook with our most current policies. And we've actually, over the past year, updated quite a few of those policies. So Patty has a whole list for me to update.
I do think there's one more thing that I don't know if it has been made public, and so I'm just going to state it here, would be the DTA. You'll see that it says 6th through 12th grade student. It used to be just 9 through 12, and we have been able to expand that to middle school for this next upcoming school year. So I'm just stating that publicly so that everybody, if watching, can hear that and know that that is a change.
I think along with that, however, and I don't mean to be casting negativity on something that is a positive, but as we consider future budget reductions, and I know we're talking about budget, that those programs are things that are extremely important for our students and our community, but there may be things that if there's not additional grant funds or things like that, that we have to consider over time.
Yeah. It's a good thing we do the handbook every year then. Any questions?
Member Lowfold?
So I just want to clarify this last point. Are we, because as soon as I saw this bullet point, I just thought to myself, are we continuing this free pass system? And so, because I would have made the assumption that we probably weren't. We've always been clear at the board table over these last 3 years. We want it, but we always are aware of what Superintendent just said, that our budgets are tight. So I'm just clarifying, so they will have this ability to use a pass this year, that we found a grant money, or we just decided to keep it in our budget for this 26-27 school year?
Right, so there was some monies that were allocated from the county that we're able to put towards this, but it was a one-time thing. It had to do with, I think, some additional TIF tax money that came in from some of the Lester Park development or something along those lines, if I remember correctly. So there was some TIF money that was reallocated to us, and when it was reallocated, it had to be for certain specific purposes, and we felt that this met the standard. So we have funding for it through this next year, but after that, there is no additional funding, which is why even though I laud the program and think it's important, I think that unfortunately it's a very nice and important to have, but it might be one of those things that has to be eliminated.
And
Can I just
to be
ask what
clear,
the budget is? I'm sorry. Can I just ask what it is we're spending on? Well,
we can get
we'll
that
do that.
when Simone
I know we've
is
said
here.
it before at the board.
We
table,
have,
what it is. I think it's like 175,000.
yes, and actually, it's even cheaper than that, that we are spending. So to be clear, we received that TIF money 3 years ago. It's the same TIF money because we've been drawing it down. So we have money still remaining out of that TIF funds that we originally received around 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, because I think we've been doing it at least 2 years. But we have enough in there for one more year. And because there has been consideration of middle school students, this was the year we said, okay, we will provide the opportunity for middle school students because there's enough funds remaining there. But we do believe this is probably the last year that we will have those funds available for middle school or even high school. So we would have to, seek alternate funds if we are going to do it beyond the 26-27 school year. Member Sadowski?
Yep, thank you. I also think this DTA program is immensely important to a lot of our students and understand the financial strain that we're on. I'm really appreciative to the county on their collaboration with these TIF funds. I'm wondering if the DTA is collecting data over the last couple years about ridership with our students, because I think, just one humble opinion, that it could encourage future ridership. So I think it's actually a really good investment for the DTA to partner with the school district for these bus rides. And I can just say, just a couple days ago, I texted my kid to see, where are you? Are you home? Can you let someone in the house for me who was there? And he said, nope, I'm out teaching my friend how to ride the city bus. They were going down, figuring out how to get down to Fitgers to where their jobs were. And he was teaching another student how to ride the city bus, which is just one example over the last couple of years of just one student. So I think it would be really interesting to get this data and figure out if we could have a conversation with them about future.
Agreed. I would say that that is something we've pursued in previous conversation. There are examples of other districts and other cities where the transit authority wants to promote something like this so that it can increase future ridership. So as you said, like if people start riding young, they oftentimes ride for life. And so I think that that's something that could be an investment, and we'll renew those conversations. But I think, unfortunately, the Duluth Transit Authority is in somewhat similar circumstances where their budgets are being reduced and fuel costs and things like that are affecting things. So I think that they are a little reluctant to invest in those future elements that might be beneficial right now.
Chair Derek Eater.
Hi, I just have a couple questions around the level 4 and the level 3 incidences. So, and just because I'm not sure. So the K through 3 kids, or is it the K through 2, we have very little capacity to expel those kids, correct? So as I look here, we have the K through 3 behavior violations and leveled response. So really, I suppose the language in there makes sense, because in 3rd grade, I guess you can expel would be for level 3, maybe at the 2nd and the 3rd offense, and then level 4, we have that option right away, correct?
Potentially. I mean,
Okay.
it depends upon
yeah.
every situation. But
Yeah.
we really are pretty restricted as
Yeah.
far as like suspensions and stuff, so yeah.
And then the level 3 offenses, as I read through all these things, this all is making sense. I do see in the level 4 that we do have and/or referral to expulsion, like I think we have that language, but I noticed that we don't have it in the level 3, and that would only be after 2nd and 3rd offenses. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and where it was added in the level 4 was at the very top in that definition. So it was right
there
at the
it is.
top where it says, you know, the list of things that are considered level 4. Because if you go throughout, it does have it, but
does have
we
it.
wanted to add it at the top there, yeah.
Okay, perfect, that makes sense. Thank you for that note, I appreciate it. And then one last question I had around, so when I went back and looked at our academic dishonesty, so it would, that you're going to add that generative E, because that's a pretty short academic dishonesty. So you just add that generative AI, and do you feel like that covers enough of what it needs to cover?
It does in that it's referred to in our, and we added it up at the top of the academic dishonesty in part 2 on page like 18, but then it's also added down in the behavior stuff. So we're addressing it in 2 different places.
Got it.
And it's enough for our APs and our administrative team to be able to say it's in the handbook. It's
Okay.
referred to in the handbook. And then syllabi will be that place where teachers will have that
They
more
could-
detailed information about it. Yeah.
All right, so this covers us, and then teachers have some capacity in their syllabi and in their class to further strengthen that sort of dishonesty. Okay, thank you both so much.
See Superintendent Magus, but I know Member Banks was next. Or do you had something to speak to
It
specifically?
just happens to be in response to Member Eater's question, so I'll just jump forward with that for just a moment. I think it does spell out things well enough for this policy cycle and for this student handbook. I know that MSBA and the Superintendent Association, they're constantly revising their AI policies as well as the academic dishonesty pieces. So I think it's important for us to continue to keep an eye on what that looks like, just because as our relationship move, you know, as we figure out how to best work with AI and make sure that it's a constructive use of AI rather than a destructive use of AI, I think it's important for us to keep a close eye on those policies, and I'm appreciative of the board and for the team for doing so.
Mayor, thank you. And I just wanted to reiterate with the DTA system for Member Sadowski, the transit agency has in all of their buses technology that actually the transit operator, when a person who either is employed by the district or students ride the bus, there's a button that they push that is exclusive to ISD 709. And so they do those reports every month and present them to their board. And so ISD 709 could get that report to determine ridership and all of those things.
Thank you.
And just for everyone's benefit, we do get those reports, so we do have our ridership information is sent to us, and we analyze it. And it's, the ridership, the reports show that ridership is consistent and up, and so students are really taking advantage of it. And when I sent the message to our middle school principals that this was going to happen, Brian Kurtzmischek immediately said, "This is great news. Many of his students will take advantage of it." I know the principals of the middle schools have been asking, at least I know Lincoln Park has been asking for this for quite some time. So I think it's going to be beneficial to our students and, again, help promote getting kids to school and our attendance initiatives, because we want to get students to school, and this helps them not only get to school, but for back and forth to work, even on the weekends. So I think it's a great thing. Member Sadowski, and then
Yes, definitely promoting independence as well, which is great. My question that I have is related to the sentence where it says, all student absences must be reported to the school through their communication tool within 48 hours. I'm just curious, so I'm assuming from how this is worded that not every school is using the same tool. And if we're trying to move toward consistency across the district, because I hear about that in other topics of conversation about moving toward consistency. And then my second question would be, I know East uses the Parent Square app. So if someone is having a hard time with that app or doesn't have a phone where they can have apps, are they allowed to call in or use a different method? I assume so, but I just wanted to ask for a community.
Yeah, so our secondaries have switched to an online form on Parent Square that is pinned at the top, and it gets a lot of use. Our first school to adopt that was Lincoln Park, and then everyone else was basically required to adopt it because people liked it so much. They do have the option to call in if they need to call in, or even bring in a note for send it with their child. And the elementaries have attendance lines that they have people call, or attendance emails as well.
Great, thank you. I really, as a parent, would say I really appreciate that it's pinned up there. So if I have to do that, it's very quick and easy, so thank you.
And next year, we're actually, because we are discontinuing the Infinite Campus call and text messages, we will be moving our attendance calls to Parent Square. So if their child is absent or from a class or absent for the day, they will have an opportunity to send a note back through the app without actually having to call in if they forgot to.
Member Lofold first, and Member Loeffler Kemp, then Superintendent Magus.
You know, just a clarification, and I know that we have to put the AI kind of statement in our area of academic ethics and dishonesty, but we have heard at the board table and through our staff that we're still struggling with the tool that will allow teachers to even identify that. I think sometimes, I mean, I want it in the handbook. I know that's the more effective way, but I think it conjures up kind of an impression maybe by our community and by our families that we do have the ability, or do we have the ability, or are we working on that ability? And we're still grappling with when we're going to roll out AI. We know they're using it, so we have to have it there. But just curious about that. And my second question that you can answer real quick is, and I think I remember. So in our syllabi or in our handbook, we are clear to teachers of all of all levels that they present a syllabi of their class at the beginning of the weeks, or the beginning of the course. Is that what you meant when you said syllabi statement?
The syllabi statement that's in their syllabi, I don't know if we have dictated in the student handbook when they have to provide that to students. I don't know if that's in our handbook.
But in our handbook, is it that staff will provide a syllabi for their course?
Yeah,
Okay, I didn't know that.
Not when.
not when, but the if. So as far as AI detection tools, they are very inconsistent. And so original work could be run through an AI detective program and be like identified and flagged, and potentially it's original work. So for us to provide a tool and then be dependent upon the tool, to me, it seems very disingenuous, I guess. What we need to have and continue to have further conversations around with staff is like, I don't want to say how to AI proof your instruction, but that's kind of really what it is. Like how to provide like when to use it, and then how do you ascertain the level of learning, maybe a little more authentically with your students, where it's like, are you handwriting and turning in handwritten paper? Are you like all those different things? Like there's ways that we can do that, and we need to just to continue to have further conversation with our staff around that.
Thank you.
Member Loeffler-Kemp.
Thank you. I know a lot of work has been done on our handbook the last 2 years in particular, and revising it and making it more manageable. So I just really appreciate that. I guess a couple questions. One is, families will receive it by email. It'll be up on our website. It'll be on schools' websites. But families can still get a copy of it if they choose, right?
Correct. I send 20 copies to each school from my budget. I send that to the print shop, and they are sent to the clericals. Also, not only will there be a PDF version of this on our website, but this will be handwritten, hand-typed into our website for ADA compliance. And then also it will allow the chatbot to answer questions regarding it as well.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, thank you. And then,
Oh, sorry. And we are getting it translated into Mandarin and Spanish, which are our top 2 languages.
wonderful. Okay, great. And then the DTA conversation, could you just, I don't think we need a presentation, but just forward us that information on ridership? I find
absolutely.
that interesting, yeah. And then my last question was on this. I can't remember, but I guess I would just add as policy chair, I appreciate all the ways that you make sure the policies are listed in the handbook, so really appreciate that.
And one last thing, just a comment, since you are the policy chair. When we did the big switch to a new format, that was because we moved to the MSBA recommended format. And so every year they produce the next version a little bit later than what we actually need from them, and for us to get this in front of you. So we will get the new handbook with changes, and we'll start immediately, like making sure that those things are updated as well for what MSBA recommends.
Unfortunately, MSBA sends theirs out either end of June and sometimes beginning of July, so it's a little late on our timeline.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent, your mic was on earlier.
It was more in connection to Member Sadowski's question, thinking about apps and communication and consistency. And we have a report later from the National School Public Relations Institute that did a communications audit. And I think that it's kind of a nice prelude to that, because we do see consistency. We want to make sure that we have access. All those questions are important when we think about what are we doing well, but also what can we improve on. So thanks for the good segue.
Thank you. Next up, we have a presentation related to our 25-26 suspension rates. It will be provided by Director Crane and our coordinator, Mr. McGowan.
Thank you, members of the board. The suspension data report, we've been bringing for about 5 years now. Todd and I have been doing it together for about 4. This presentation is done in multiple formats, some in front of many audiences. And tonight, we're going to try to, we've been asked to keep it short, but we will take questions and respond. Todd, would you help me out, just celebrate our team of people, behind the scenes people that help us out with this data?
Yeah, so my name is Todd McGowan, Mental Health Coordinator for the Duluth Schools, and this is really a collective effort. You know, like Jason said, we've been working on this project for multiple years. This is not a finished presentation. This was information that we just started to process, so you're really getting the first view of this, and this will also go into a much larger presentation that's more robust for the Human Rights Commission for the Duluth City Council. This, like Jason said, this has taken a team of effort, or a team of people, and the effort behind it. So John Herman, who else? Our psychologist, our MTSS coordinators, Danielle Dorn. So this is really a compilation of information that has come from multiple places and people throughout the district. So, yep. So just to jump in, one of the things that we wanted to celebrate is that over the last 4 years, we've continued to have a reduction in the amount of days that students are out of school or exclusionary discipline is used. We see, and one of the things that I also want to speak to right now is that we have been implementing EduClimber for the last 2 years, which is a data warehouse that communicates with Infinite Campus. So we have multiple avenues to conceptualize and visualize data. But over the last 4 years, we've continued to see a reduction. There are 2 numbers that I want to point out very quickly. So the 1,338 is the total number of days that students have been out of schools. We'll cross-reference that here in a little bit with the number of incidents that have been accounted for throughout this school year. But there is a nuance, and we'll talk about that here in a second.
And as Todd indicated earlier, he said this is not a finished product because we grabbed these numbers from about 2 weeks ago, and we know that a lot of suspension data was not entered into the system yet. We think we're going to be really close, but under our comparison between last year and this year.
So by school, if we were to just draw out the entire school district, we can start to plot where most of our incidents are happening, which is Lincoln Park Middle School, which accounts for about half of our total number of in-school and out-of-school suspensions. I do want to just have once again, a nuance. The schools on the left hand of the sheet are care and treatment centers. So just to give you that nuance, I just didn't have the code and how that was correlated to this school when I pulled this information.
What's also significant about this is a mandatory presentation that correlates to our CEIS project that we have. And the CEIS project is Coordinated Early Intervening Services. And we spend mandatorily 6 federal funded positions are funded out of that CEIS project. And we're hoping to reduce students of color suspensions more than white student suspension rates. And we're hoping to reduce that by 5% more. And we're just going to be transparent right from the get-go that we are not seeing that yet, but we're going to continue to work on that project. And for that reason, Lincoln Middle Schools are one of our closest advocates for, they have an alternative to suspension program, so does Myers-Wilkins, so does Denfeld. We'd like to see Lincoln see some major improvements for next year, and we're going to work closely with them.
The other, part of this conversation is, also celebrating that we're using OSS less. When we have an appropriate continuum of mental health services and supportive services for our students, we're able to differentiate how kids learn and the opportunities that they have to be in space with trained clinicians and/or people that focus on social emotional behavioral health. And once again, I think that as this presentation develops, that's a trend that you're going to continue to see, is that we're opting for in-school suspension more often. However, that creates its own nuance and set of problems that we can talk about as we continue. So as far as students receiving OSS or ISS, these are the numbers broken down by American Indian, Black or African American, and then comparatively speaking to our white students. So we continue to have a disparity in regards to the number of children of color that are being placed in school or out of school suspension. However, what we are seeing as well is that ISS option is increasing. Specifically, when we take a look at the white students who have been placed in school suspension, having an increase of almost 75%, which is an absolute, giant number. And with data, sometimes it leads to more questions, and that's really where we're at right now, is digging further to find out where those pockets are, what's happening in our schools, but also wanting to celebrate that all students with out-of-school suspension has reduced by 13% since last year, which, if our goal is 5%, 13% is a number that we want to continue to replicate. Once again, ISS is being used more. Our OSS is being out is being used less. But once again, like I talk a lot about multi-tiered systems and supports, and just the implication of this is that we're having kids in our buildings that require some level of intervention, but being very intentional about what that looks like. How are they getting the skills, training, and/or support in maintaining their behavior in an academic environment.
So the earlier slide was incidences. This is students.
This is total students.
Yeah,
Yep.
students impacted with out of school or in school.
And then, once again, just going back to that number, 1,077, those are the total number of incidents that have led to in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension. Our primary behaviors that are being flagged for either of those two things are disruption and disorderly conduct, fighting, attendance, which is always needs a explanation. It's students that are in school but refusing to go to class, physical contact, and then cannabis use, which is interesting because that wasn't one of our top 5 last year, but it showed up this year in the reports that we're running.
One of the strongest and positive indicators over the last 5 years is many administrators used to go to the student handbook and say, for this incident, 5 days. And you'll see from the data that really 1 or 2 days is what administrators are using now. They're not using a standard 5 days, you're going home for 5 days. That's powerful information. And for that reason, the greatest reason of why we're reducing our overall suspension rates.
And I would add, it's very appropriate that we just followed student handbook conversations, because that really is the driver, is creating common language, common interventions, or, I'm losing my words here. But it really does set the baseline for what administrators can expect, and then also how to carry out our handbook policy. And then just across ethnicities, so the disproportionality rates. So at this point, students of color are accounting for 50%, roughly higher of our total suspension rates, which we want to continue to work on and understand the implications of that. That number has been historically pretty accurate and consistent over the last couple years. So once again, as we get better with our MTSS implementation, as we get better in intervention, we want to have a direct impact on what those numbers look like.
Member Sadowski?
Oh, I can wait till the end. Oh, that's fine.
No problem.
We're really close.
And then finally, this is what Jason was referring to. So all of the length of days by disability categories identified, almost 75%, 80% of our total in-school and out-of-school suspensions are no longer than 1 day. So if that consequence has been assigned, generally speaking, most of the students that will receive ISS or OSS are back up and running the next day, back included into the learning environment.
Another educational component we've been working with administrators quite closely on. Anthony brought in district lawyers at times to do some presentations to really understand our responsibilities. What jumps out at me in this slide also is the SPED numbers are larger than the gen ed numbers. And when a kid qualifies for special education supports, you're really not supposed to initially first suspend kids for disability-related things. So that's a concept that our administrative team is really wrestling with. I was an EBD case manager for years and just advocated to principals that, yes, my kiddo on my caseload might punch another person, but send him to me. Don't send him home OSS, because I can educate this kid and provide him with the necessary skills and training that they need to be more successful in the school setting, rather than send him home. So just wanted to birdwalk on the special education data there. When we have 2,282 kids with IEPs and 8,000, so about 6,000 only gen ed kids, the special education numbers are greater. That's another disparity issue.
Thank you. Member Sadowski and then Member Banks.
Yeah, I just had more of a couple comments, but if you wanted to comment back, feel free or not. I think this is page 5 or 6. For me, it's page 34, the length by incident, 1077. When you had mentioned the cannabis use and how it wasn't in the top 5 last year, but it showed up this year, I just wanted to kind of give a shout out to especially our Lincoln Park middle school staff, because I know that they identified this early on, not from talking to them, but I know that they're bringing in community partners with substance use professionals. The counselors have done that, or some staff have done that, and that was great. I just know that they have identified that early on, not just from this data right now, but they've been trying to address that this year, which I really appreciate. So that was one comment. I don't know, should I say my other comment?
I think you're exactly right. I mean, as we get better, and as we, invite more people into our buildings, I think it gives us a better glimpse of what the issues are. I also think that the landscape is changing, you know what I mean? As things are legalized, as they're in proximity to our schools, there is another set of circumstances that I think that we need to be ready for and to address.
Right. I know they've been doing sounds like they've been doing some cool groups and things like that and work on that. Did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I want to add to that, but you have to help me out. Give me the name of the position that Lincoln Park added using the grant. I know it's related to substance use, but I can't remember the actual name.
So Wendy Wolf is the person in
Wendy
that
Wolf.
position.
Yep.
And she's doing a ton of proactive work. So she is specifically focusing on substance abuse, but then there's multiple layers within that: source of strength, peer to peer, problem solving, things along those lines. So they're doing a ton of good work at Lincoln. In addition to their alternative to suspension program, some of the numbers that we're starting to see as far as students that are coming back through that program are reducing. So we know that we're on to something, and now it looks like we need, you know what I mean, we have to support it.
Yeah, I would lift up the district in supporting that position, and I really appreciate Wendy's work on that. I mean, I guess it goes without saying, but since weed has been legalized, it's just been we've seen more use among younger youth, and the impacts on the brain development are very concerning. So I really appreciate that as a district we're trying to address that at the middle school level and kind of get out ahead of it.
If I could answer too, I just want to, reiterate how important it is to have people in space that kids trust. Sometimes with our co-located staff, they're not there enough to build relationships in a way that allows students to engage authentically. And I think that speaks volumes about Wendy's position, is that she's there every day and she's a known commodity, which is incredibly important for a lot of our students.
Absolutely, it's about that relationship building. So thank you for adding that to it. My other quick comment was kind of related to the data by school. It looks like it's page 2, where we saw that Lincoln Park, again, middle school had more in-school and out-of-school suspensions. And I just, yep, that's concerning. I know that there's a lot of ways that we're trying to address that, and I would just lift up the way that our Lincoln Park middle school staff are communicating and trying to provide continuity as the 8th grade class moves to Denfeld. I know that they do a really good job with that, which is really important, so that those kids are supported as they move into the high school.
Thank you. And before I go to Member Banks, and I also want to point out that as Director Crane has shared, one of the things that we are cited for is the oversuspension of certain student groups. So we are working in partnership with Lincoln Park to support their efforts to put in alternatives to suspensions and to put in other programming to help curb some of the suspension rates, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure at some point that we are not identified in those areas for suspending students. So just want to make sure that we are surfacing that again, that we have the challenge, but the school and administration is really working hard to change those results.
Great, thank you.
Member Banks?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm wondering if you have information on what the actual overall suspension rate is for the entire district system-wide. Is that like 1.2 or 2%, whatever that is? And then if there is any information available related to the demographics that we've been talking about, African heritage, Native heritage kids system-wide, and what that percentage is? Because I don't see that on here, but I'm thinking that possibly is available.
That information is available. I have it all on spreadsheets. We were given 5 slides in about 10 minutes. So I would love to come back and talk more and do a deeper dive on this data set specifically. I think it's incredibly important. And if we don't understand what the problem is, right, we're never going to be able to make those gains. So that number is ready. We handpicked a few points just to invite you to the conversation, but more to come. Yep.
Member Meixel?
My question was along the same lines as Member Banks. Director Crane, you mentioned how, our total number of special ed kids and how they're reflected in our suspension rates. And so I was wondering the same about some of our different demographics of children. So that's, I look forward to having more of information about that and hearing more about the different strategies that we have going into it, which sounds like there's a lot of.
Acknowledge that for the board. We have, as Todd said, we actually have 8 slides in here, and we didn't get in trouble from Shannon who gave us. But we had a presentation with about 15 slides, and we're more than willing to come back.
I would just reiterate, there's so much good work being done, and sometimes it's hard to quantify, but the thing that I always go back to is implementation takes 3, 4, 5 years before you start to see results. And we're seeing that, as these numbers, come out. So I would love to talk even more about the interventions, the things that we're doing in space that have a direct correlation to these numbers.
Chair Derek Eater.
I just want to say with the 6th grader at Lincoln Park, he had a wonderful year. It's a wonderful school. I just want to lift that up. I know this is just deceiving. I went with, I don't know how many 6th graders to Fort Snelling, and it was a wonderful experience, and they were great, and Lincoln Park is a fantastic school. So even though this is part of our story at Lincoln Park, but it is not the entirety of their story. So I just wanted to start out with that. And then the second thing, I just always want to remember as we look at the difference between in-school and out-of-school suspension, when a student, and we can see this from the data, we're talking about assault, we're talking about bullying and harassment, we're talking about disorderly conduct, we're talking about harassment, threats and intimidation, vandalism, like level 3 and level 4 offenses are serious offenses that generally on the other end of those things are students or teachers. So I want us to keep that in mind because students, while we always drive to keep those rates going down, I think that we all have to acknowledge that we do see violence happen in our schools, right? And kids and teachers have the right to go to school to feel safe. And so while I want to acknowledge that we have work to do, there are kids on the other end of each one of these incidences, especially when it comes to violence, that need to be lifted up and remembered as well. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you, dear Chair Eater. We by no means wanted to have any of this data be a shame or a put down to any school. We just wanted to be really transparent about what's going on in our school system. And if you notice, the 2 middle schools, there's something to be said about middle schools. Their brains are not fully yet developed, and they're mischievous. So those were the 2 largest schools. I would have guessed maybe Denfeld would have been in front of Ordine East, but the middle schools won the race.
Just wanted to say one more thing.
Member
You
Banks.
mentioned Fort Snelling. I ran into a mom and her son who were on that trip, and she said he had a great time. Just letting you know.
Cleaned them out of ice cream.
Thank you.
Oh, just one last thing I wanted to say, if that's okay. But it is really important, and just going back to that tenet of how do we use data, right? When we have these data points, then we know where to shift our focus, because a lot of our kids are doing exactly what they need to do, and that's a huge celebration. But when we see maybe an outlier like that, then maybe that's a data or a sampling error, or something's not being logged correctly. There's multiple ways to interpret that. So I just wanted to clarify that as, once again, we get better, we'll be able to clean up this information in a way that's useful and allows us to read and respond to what kids need.
Thank you. Next up, we have a presentation from NESPRA related to our communications audit. Adele Wellings will be present, and our guest, Jessica Shackleton. And so while they're getting set up, Board, I just want to just quickly give you some information that was asked earlier as it relates to the DTA and the TIF. So originally, we received roughly $361,500. That's $361,500. That's what we originally received 2 years ago. We spent, over the last couple of years, we spent $40,000 in FY25. Last year, it was approximately $140,000 spent for the DTA, and that's this current year, 25-26. And so we have roughly $180,000 remaining. So with the remaining $180,000, that's how we will be able to fund the one additional year and adding the middle school as part of that year.
Hi, everyone, and members of the board. I'm very happy to be here today. My name is Jessica Shackleton, and I work for the National School Public Relations Association, or NSPRA, which is a professional organization that supports nearly 3,000 school communication leaders in the US and Canada. And our goal is simple. It's to help schools communicate strategically, build trust, and strengthen relationships with their communities. Before joining NSPRA, I spent about 25 years working in school communications, and now as NSPRA's Communications Research Specialist, I help districts nationwide through communications audits and accompanying research. For this project, I had the privilege of serving as auditor for Duluth's communications audit, working alongside my colleagues listed on the slide on NSPRA's research team. How do I advance? Okay. Here's just a quick rundown of what I'll be covering today. I'm going to start by explaining the goals of the audit and the process that we used. Then I'll review some very brief key areas of the report, including some overall perceptions of the district. I will provide a SWOT analysis, and I'll share how Duluth's communication program compares to national best practices. And then, of course, the meat of the report, I will briefly review the recommendations and action steps coming out of the work and close with some considerations for implementing the recommendations before I open it up to questions from all of you. So the goal of this audit was twofold. First, to seek data, opinions, and perceptions, and from these to assess the effectiveness of Duluth's, the effectiveness and management of the current public relations, marketing, and engagement efforts in the district. And second, to provide customized recommendations on strategies and best practices to build and enhance the overall program. I want to point out that unlike financial audits, this review was not required. District leadership voluntarily invited NSPRA to conduct it as part of what I can see is a commitment and continuous improvement and to guide future communication strategies to the benefit of all of your stakeholders. An effective communications program starts with research, so that's where the audit process began, capturing both quantitative data and qualitative perceptions. First, a materials review. Adele shared with me numerous samples, including newsletters, your strategic plan, branding assets, crisis messaging, and I also reviewed the district and school websites and social media channels. I evaluated each of these for clarity, consistency, visual appeal, ease of use, and stakeholder engagement. Secondly is the SCOPE survey, which is NSPRA's nationally benchmarked survey. Stakeholders shared how they get information, how informed they feel on key topics about the district, and their perceptions of the district and its communications. And results were compared to data from more than 140 districts nationwide. Finally, the core of the audit process, focus groups and interviews. Over 3 days in December of 2025, I met virtually with 10 stakeholder groups, and I interviewed the superintendent, the communications officer, and the family and community engagement specialist to gather perceptions from the district's internal and external audiences. While this kind of qualitative feedback is certainly more anecdotal, it does provide rich insight into community perceptions that complements the survey data and materials review. Together, all of these components create a comprehensive picture of how communication is working in Duluth and where it can improve. So first, an overview of the SCOPE survey participation. The survey was sent to parents and guardians, employees, and the wider school community, and it was open from November 17th to December 12th. A total of 469 survey responses were received. Among those, 56 individuals indicated that they are both parents and employees in the district. A similar survey was shared with high school students during the same date range, with a total of 108 responses received. The SCOPE survey uses industry standard reliability formula to calculate target participation rates for each of the survey audiences, and these targets help ensure results with margins of error of plus or minus 5% for parents and employees, and plus or minus 10% for community members and students. The margin of error really tells us how much the survey results might vary from reality. So for example, if 75% of employees say that they are satisfied with communication and the margin of error is 5%, the actual satisfaction rate really could be anywhere from 70 to 80%. And while getting as many people as possible to take the survey is always important, I do want to point out that small differences like this don't usually change the big picture in a survey of this type, which is much more about perceptions and opinions and feelings. As we all know, different kinds of polls, for instance, a vote, one number different can make all the difference in the world. But the kind of margin of error we target here doesn't tend to lead to big strategy changes. As you can see, Duluth's margin of error targets for students was met. Targets for parents and staff were nearly met. As a result, confidence for these audiences are fairly tight, and there's a high reliability in these results. However, just 27 surveys were received among community members, and the target was 100. So the margin of error for that audience is nearly 19%. That means these results are less precise, and there's a larger range within true community member sentiment can actually fall. Accordingly, and as it's noted in the full audit report, no significant recommendations were based solely on community survey responses. So beginning with a few key data points from the survey, I want to start with overall perceptions of the district. The results show a fairly consistent pattern across the stakeholder groups. A majority of respondents across all audiences rate the district as average or better. In particular, it was 82% of parents and 84% of employees. However, the proportion rating the district excellent or above average remains relatively modest, while roughly a third of community members and students rate the district below average. When these results are translated to a 5-point Likert scale and compared to the results of districts nationwide who have also participated in the scope survey, the district does score somewhat below national averages, but I do want to point out that the national averages and Duluth scores all fall into the 3 numerical range, which means while they're at slightly different ends of the range, it's still solidly in the average range. So the takeaway is not that perceptions are overwhelmingly negative at all. Rather, perceptions appear to be somewhat mixed, but with meaningful opportunities to strengthen confidence and understanding among your key audiences. And when we look at communication specifically, the pattern is quite similar. Parents and employees are somewhat more positive than community members and students, but again, the district scores fall just below national benchmark averages, again, though, in the average range. Most respondents describe communications as just that, average. And so the challenge is really moving more people from that average opinion into the above average perceptions. Community members stand out as less satisfied, likely reflecting the fact that community members tend to receive less direct communication from most public school districts, since by their nature, so many messages are specifically targeted for parents or staff. So community members are often the most likely to rely on external sources where perceptions really can be mixed. When we asked people how likely they were to recommend Duluth to a friend, we used those responses to calculate something called a Net Promoter Score, or NPS. It's a common way to measure satisfaction and loyalty to a brand or organization. To calculate the NPS, respondents are grouped into 3 categories. Promoters are those who are very satisfied and willing to recommend the district and talk it up. Detractors tend to be dissatisfied and may be ones sharing negative feedback. And passives fall in between and are, just as the name says, tend not to do much either way. The score for the NPS is simply the percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors, which means that the results can range from -100 to +100. And when I present to an education audience, I do ask educators to throw out the typical way you view numbers, because while something like 50 in any class would be considered a failing grade, in fact, anything above 0 is considered good, and 50 is really considered excellent. So adjust there a little bit. That said, Duluth scores did fall into the negative range, meaning that detractors currently outnumber promoters. Parents and employees scored -19, community members -22, and students -24. So these scores suggest that stakeholders have reservations about recommending the district. Importantly, Net Promoter Score is not simply a communication measure. It reflects overall experiences, perceptions, and trust. While communications alone cannot solve these issues, it can help address misunderstandings, increase transparency, and strengthen confidence over time. There are many more findings compiled in the complete audit report that, taken together, paint a clear picture of where Duluth stands. But I do want to, before I continue, mention and remind all of you that perceptions are just that. They may not always be accurate, but they still matter because they do influence how people feel and how they might influence others. So, and again, how they talk about their experiences. So that's why even if perceptions may be completely mistaken, they deserve attention. Before discussing the SWOT findings, for anyone who's not familiar, I just want to explain that a SWOT analysis identifies an organization's internal strengths and weaknesses, along with external opportunities and threats. So it helps highlight both what's working well and where strategic attention may be needed across both internal and external spheres. So several strengths emerged consistently throughout the audit. Perhaps most importantly was the willingness of district leadership to engage in this self-assessment and improvement through this audit process. Participants also consistently praised strong school-level relationships among staff members, families, and community partners, often emphasizing how much further schools go on behalf of their families. The district's wide range of academic programs and student opportunities was frequently cited as a point of pride for residents, as was the district's commitment to equity and inclusion, which I found to be strongly reflected throughout its communications. And finally, strong community partnerships provide important support for students and families and create a solid foundation on which future communication efforts can build. Weaknesses identified in the audit were largely structural. The most significant finding was the absence of a formal written strategic communication plan that establishes priorities, objectives, and clear expectations for communications. Participants also described situations where communications staff was brought into discussions later than is ideal, limiting opportunities for proactive communication planning. Staffing capacity was another recurring theme. Expectations for communication continue to grow from all audiences, while available resources remain limited. Stakeholders also expressed a desire for more substantive communication around complex topics such as finances, staffing, curriculum, and long-term planning. And finally, recent leadership turnover and unclear decision-making processes have contributed to what's perceived as inconsistency in how information moves through the organization and reaches employees and stakeholders. Moving on to opportunities that were identified, one of the strongest is the district's existing base of goodwill. Many participants expressed pride in their schools and positive experiences, particularly at their individual buildings. The challenge is that those positive experiences don't always translate into positive perceptions of the district as a whole. There's also an important opportunity to more clearly communicate the district's value proposition by highlighting the very programs, people, and outcomes that stakeholders value and treasure so much about Duluth. And finally, stakeholders consistently expressed interest in greater transparency and more meaningful two-way communication, creating a great opportunity to strengthen trust through those improved communication practices. Threats that were identified were largely environmental and perception-based. Community members who are not directly connected to the schools often receive information from third parties rather than the district itself, which is always difficult when you cannot carry your own story. Historical issues also and some long-standing perceptions continue to shape how current communications are received. Participants also referenced concerns about an east-west divide and lingering skepticism regarding district decisions and priorities. At the same time, budget pressures, enrollment growth, and staff workload challenges create ongoing demands that also contribute to making consistent communication more difficult. Again, these are not communication problems alone, but they do reinforce the importance of strategic, proactive, and transparent communication. One of the things I appreciate about NSPRA's audit process is that it doesn't solely rely on stakeholder opinions. We also benchmark communication practices against national standards, which helps validate many of the findings and recommendations that I will be discussing in a moment. These standards, as outlined in NSPRA's rubrics of practice and suggested measures, a well-worn copy is shown for you here, examine 7 key areas of communications and place programs along a continuum from emerging to established to exemplary. The purpose isn't to assign a grade, rather it helps identify where some strong foundations already exist and where some additional systems and processes and resources may be needed to move the program forward. Unlike surveys and focus groups, this part of the audit is not based on perceptions. It evaluates Duluth's communication practices and how they align with recognized best practices in school public relations. That said, I did find that the benchmarking results align closely with what we heard throughout the audit. Areas identified as strengths throughout the stakeholder research were parent and family communications, marketing and branding, crisis communications, and diverse, equitable, and inclusive communications. And these were also the areas of Duluth's program rated as established when benchmarked against national standards. Areas identified as emerging include comprehensive communication planning, internal communications, and finance communications. Importantly, I want to point out that emerging does not mean absent or ineffective. Rather, it indicates that systems and practices are in place, but there are opportunities for them to become more systematic, proactive, and strategic, and consistently implemented across the organization. Notably, these are the same areas reflected in several recommendations that I'll speak to next, providing some additional validation that these recommendations, I hope, are focused on the right priorities for the district. So based on the findings, the report offers 6 recommendations to help move the district forward. These come directly from the data and feedback gathered through the surveys, the focus groups, interviews, and materials review. And together they focus on building communications capacity, strengthening planning, improving internal communication, increasing transparency, making content more audience-centered, and simplifying how information is delivered to stakeholders. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of each one with some action steps to suggest how they might be put into practice. The full report, of course, contains much greater detail and more tactical options for implementation. And it's important to note that these recommendations are not 6 separate projects. They're highly interconnected. For example, improving transparency becomes easier when internal communication processes improve. More audience-centered communication becomes easier when there's a strategic communication plan to guide those efforts. And nearly all of them become easier when sufficient communication capacity exists. So together they form really a roadmap rather than a checklist. So the first recommendation focuses on communication capacity. The audit found a mismatch between stakeholder expectations regarding communication and the resources currently available to meet them. Now, I do want to pause and let you all know that I recognize additional staffing is difficult to discuss in an environment where budget reductions are already happening and anticipated. However, this recommendation appears first for a reason, and I did spend a lot of time considering it. There's simply no other way to say it than to really meet the needs and the expectations of your stakeholders and to exemplify the good work going on here. It simply does require more capacity. But as I will be getting into, we never anticipate that any district can simply meet all the recommendations of this audit in the short term. And this may not be something that can happen right away, but I do want to talk about a couple of different ways that it could be met. And again, throughout the audit, what I heard from stakeholders were gaps that related to transparency, consistency, and responsiveness. And with one professional responsible for strategic planning, media relations, crisis communications, social media, websites, marketing, enrollment communication, and day-to-day requests, those expectations simply exceed the capacity of any one person, even one with the expertise that you are lucky to have. I do want to point out, and there's many more details for those who would appreciate the data in the full report. NSPRA creates a member profile survey report every other year. And so that national data shows that districts of similar size to Duluth often have additional communication support staff. Similar student enrollment districts, more than half have between 2 and 7 staff members. While the district can make progress in some areas without additional capacity, many of these recommendations become significantly harder to sustain without additional dedicated communication support. That said, again, knowing the difficult and competing priorities that school boards face, other ways to add to capacity would be to formalize the informal network of communication liaisons across schools and departments. Some of the typical tactics and responsibilities, such as website updates, calendar updates, those who produce the newsletters at different schools and send out messages. The idea that they could be more of a team, a network, with some coordination from Adele, I think would, again, at the very least, lead to more consistency across schools in terms of the timing of communications and some better certainty that the same message is being conveyed. Kind of cutting off the game of telephone by having people that continually focus on these as available within their job responsibilities. I also want to point out that more and more districts are actually turning to high school students that show an interest in journalism or communications or public relations. And depending on, again, there can be very full-fledged internship programs, which is a possibility if there would be instructors that could help with the oversight. So Adele doesn't trade communications work for oversight of a student, but there's also smaller ways. Students are great storytellers, and there would be a lot of those stories that could pass through Adele and help to tell the stories from unique new perspectives. And finally, I just want to point out the idea that I know Adele and others have been mulling, but a college intern, where you wouldn't need to worry about benefits, for instance, but perhaps it's related to their coursework and it would be a longer commitment. So there are myriad ways to look at this, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't start out by saying the most impactful step, when possible, would be to expand your communications capacity. One of the most consistent themes throughout the audit was that, oops, I think I skipped it. No, I did not. Sorry about that. Was that stakeholders wanted more communication. By that, I don't mean more messages, but more context in the messages that they receive, and particularly around issues such as finance and staffing and long-term planning. So this recommendation regarding a strategic communication plan addresses that need for more information about high-stakes issues. A strategic communication plan provides the roadmap for doing that intentionally rather than reactively. It helps determine which audiences need information, what they need to know, when they need to hear it, and how success will be measured. Without that kind of a roadmap, communication efforts can easily become focused on outputs, making sure the newsletter gets out every Friday, making sure social media posts are there, and just churning out announcements, rather than focusing on the outcomes, such as stakeholder understanding, engagement, and building trustful relationships. So the recommendation calls for developing a formal plan using what in public relations is referred to as the RPI process: research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. In other words, you start with data and stakeholder insights, for which this audit already gives a great head start. You establish measurable objectives aligned with district goals, implement targeted communication strategies unique to audience needs, and then evaluate the results to determine what's working and where to adjust moving forward. This recommendation also really targets the need for more proactive issues management and crisis communication planning, identifying potential issues early and planning communications before challenges arise allow the district to respond more consistently and effectively in the moment. Likewise, a written communication crisis plan with clear roles, responsibilities, and ready-to-use tools help ensure timely, accurate communication during emergencies and other high-profile situations. I know there's the beginning and many great crisis communication steps. So again, as part of this recommendation, it's making sure more of that is documented. So should Adele ever not be available or another key role player not be available, it's not inside people's heads, but somewhere there where others can access it. Many challenges described during the audit were actually internal communication challenges. Staff frequently reported learning of information later than they would like, receiving incomplete context, or at times being asked to answer questions before they fully understood the decision or the information themselves. At the same time, employees described feeling overwhelmed by the volume of information coming from multiple directions. So one of the goals of this recommendation is not simply to share more information, but really to better curate it, helping staff quickly identify what's most important, what requires action, and where to find additional details when needed. Effective communication is not measured by how much is distributed, but by whether employees receive the right information at the right time in a format that's useful to them. I'm sure you all know that employees of the district are the most trusted source of information for families. And so when staff members feel informed and prepared and confident in what they know, external communication tends to improve as well. So taking an employees first communication approach anchored by clear information sharing processes, a stronger staff intranet, and improved onboarding resources can help ensure that staff members are informed and positioned to serve as trusted ambassadors for the district. Several of the action steps under this recommendation focus on creating more intentional pathways for information sharing, including rethinking the staff newsletter so that it serves as a curated source of important information specific to staff, rather than simply another place where information is posted. Many stakeholder concerns also ultimately traced back to questions about how decisions are made and how input from the community is used. Throughout the audit, participants frequently expressed a desire for more transparency about district decision-making, including who is involved, how decisions are reached, and how stakeholder feedback influences outcomes. There was no shortage of acknowledgement that the district seeks stakeholder input, but as I find often with districts, very often people are thanked for their input, and it is used. But districts sometimes forget to describe how it's used, including describe aspects of the feedback that didn't make sense or couldn't be operationalized, and again, providing that context. So the goal of this recommendation has nothing to do with changing the decisions you make or changing the role that stakeholder input has. The role is there. This is really to just make the process more visible and understandable to stakeholders. Research consistently shows that people are more likely to trust decisions when they understand how they were reached, even if they disagree with the outcome. So several of these action steps focus on making that decision-making process more transparent, such as communicating decisions that you will be facing sooner. So there is more time to prepare the community for the same kind of background information that all of you have and have the opportunity to sink your teeth into before you have to make that decision. Also, continuing to seek input from a variety of voices and perspectives as you do, and closing the loop by explaining how feedback and data shaped the final outcome. Taken together, I hope these steps would address the SWOT weaknesses related to unclear decision-making processes and the threat posed to the lingering distrust tied to the way his district decisions were made historically. The district has many strengths that stakeholders recognize: strong programs, dedicated employees, community partnerships, and commitment to students. Yet those strengths are not always reflected in larger district-wide perceptions. So this recommendation focuses on more strategically communicating issues that stakeholders care most about, while also helping the district tell a fuller story about its work and impact. It addresses the opportunity to better communicate what the district offers and helps counter the threat posed by those persistent negative narratives. Achieving this shift requires more than creating additional content. In fact, it may even mean streamlining. Several action steps focus again on planning ahead, using those same kind of communication planning principles for the strategic plan, and focusing on individual initiatives. Year-round budget communication strategy, editorial calendars to identify high-impact topics before they become urgent. That, again, is key to being proactive and planning ahead and making sure those stories don't get crowded out by last-minute needs or crises that disrupt the school day. While a one-person communication office has no shortage of competing priorities, the district cannot rely on finding time for this kind of work in the moment. So planning ahead is what really helps ensure that the important topics that your community wants to know more about receive consistent attention rather than being crowded out by the day-to-day demands. Throughout the audit, stakeholders described a communications environment that can often feel fragmented and a little difficult to navigate. Families reported uncertainty about where information should be located. Employees described overlapping systems and inconsistent expectations, and community members often relied on local media or social media because they weren't sure where to find district information directly. The challenge is not a lack of communication channels. The district has many. In many cases, though, it's the absence of clear expectations about which channels should be used for which purposes and where stakeholders should go for information. And I would say at times that's both internal and external. So this recommendation focuses on creating a more intentional and user-friendly communication ecosystem. The action steps center on clarifying the role of key communication tools, strengthening district and school websites as reliable information hubs, even for the kinds of evergreen content that don't change all the time, and providing clear guidance to families and community members about where and how to find information. I will say that I have no doubt the district does a lot of this. And so the important thing is to be looking at those touch points and seeing what additional touch points might be needed. Because if people feel like they don't know, then perhaps they need some additional reminders. Perhaps it is embedding more things into back to school reminders, or maybe they exist there. And by January, people need another reminder. So again, these recommendations, it doesn't mean the district isn't doing it. It means somehow it's not getting through. And it's a great opportunity to look at new ways to communicate some of these things. The recommendation also recognizes that making information easier to access often means making it easier to consume. So organizing information consistently, reducing duplication across platforms, and simplifying navigation can improve user experience without increasing the volume of communication. So again, it's not about adding channels, it's about making the existing ones easier to understand, easier to navigate, and easier to trust. As the board considers these recommendations, I do want to emphasize that it's important to recognize communication is an organizational responsibility, not just the responsibility of the communication office. These recommendations are intended to provide guidance for strengthening communication, increasing transparency, and building stakeholder trust over time throughout the district. And as the district thinks about implementation, it's important to approach these recommendations strategically. The report is intended to serve as a roadmap, not a checklist that must be completed all at once. NSPRA typically recommends prioritizing implementation over multiple years, focusing on a small number of high-impact initiatives at a time. In fact, most districts find it realistic to tackle no more than 1 or 2 major recommendations each year, while maintaining existing communication programs and services. The recommendations are presented in a suggested priority order, but obviously the district may choose to adjust the sequence based on local needs, available resources, and organizational priorities. Some recommendations represent some quick wins, which are noted in the report, that can be implemented with relatively little investment. Others provide opportunities to rethink existing processes or reassign responsibilities. A few, of course, do require additional resources or capacity to implement and effectively sustain over time. Perhaps most importantly, success will depend on leadership support, cross-department collaboration, and a shared commitment to communication as a district-wide function and not the responsibility of any one individual or office. So the key takeaway is that implementation should be phased, purposeful, collaborative, and sustainable, focusing on the recommendations that will provide the greatest value to Duluth and its stakeholders. With that overview of the findings and recommendations, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
A little bit of a comment and then just kind of some thoughts on next steps. I really appreciate the report. I think it required a lot of perseverance and depth of really investigation. And I also appreciate the team's openness. I think it's important for all of us. We all recognize that the communication is part of all of our work. And so I think that sometimes looking really clearly at the whole of a complex problem like this can be sometimes even intimidating because you see the good, you see the bad, you see the ugly, but I think it's important for us to recognize current reality and what we need to work on. I'd also like to say that we deeply appreciate Adele Wellens, our communications officer. She's superb, and she's actually the president-elect for the coming year for the Minnesota School Board, or not School Board Association, the Minnesota School Public Relations Association. And so that's an honor that we have. And I think that we've seen that we're trying, for a long time, we've been trying to do a sufficient job with one person that is really, in some ways, requiring of more people. I remember when we changed the position, when we had the previous person moved out of the position, we had an external audit of the department. And one of the recommendations was that for a district of our size, we should consider potentially adding resource. At that time, we said we couldn't, and again, we're in a difficult spot to some degree where it's difficult to add resource, but I think it's important for us to consider what this means, not even just from a, I'm thinking about it from a perspective of what are the, not just what are the costs to add to a position, what are the costs of not adding a position. When I think about things like enrollment, community perception, chances of referenda passing, things like that are critical, and it's important for us to think about. I'm not saying that we're advocating for another position at this time, but I think it's something that we really have to clearly think about, especially since it was identified as one of the top priorities of the report. I think the second priority is extremely important as well, thinking about what is our strategic plan around communications. I think some of the things that we do well that are exemplified as being established rather than emerging. A lot of those things are around urgent communication, whether it's emergency communication or other things, because the blinking red light in organizations frequently gets the most attention. But it doesn't mean that the other communications are not important. Really, I think that those important communications are critical as well. But working on a strategic plan with Adele and with the rest of the team to think about what this looks like, I want that to be one of my top priorities for this year. I know I haven't talked about my superintendent goals for this next year, but one of the areas under Standard 3, communication and community relationships, informs the community as a whole. That's element 3C. And and I bring this up because it's a rubric and it really looks at how does communication affect the board? So if communication as a district is ineffective, it would mean that we do not provide information the community needs to understand school district issues and/or concerns, and that hinders board ability to meet its responsibilities. Where if we do a highly effective job, we actively keep community informed with appropriate and regular communication on a variety of school district topics and issues and/or concerns, which allows the school district to meet its responsibilities. So really, the nexus of communication and the work of the board and the work of the superintendent is very critical. So I think it's important that we re-emphasize our work on communications and thinking about things we have coming up, like potential referendum, thinking about market share for the district, thinking about just trust and communication in general. I think that the communication needs to be one of the, if not the, focus area for the coming year. And I'm appreciative of you for this report.
Thank you. I do want to mention that throughout the focus groups, thinking about staff in particular, I think there was absolutely a recognition, in particular among, I'll say, leadership in a very broad sense, that it is everyone's job in the district. And I think, at least while I only met a handful of employees, I think they all embrace that. So again, in whatever, financial environment, and whether or not, resources can expand, I think that is a good foundation if there can be more coordination across many of these positions and identifying individuals really that can help sort of form that network and agree on, again, some common approaches to things. Again, speaking to what I heard you speak to earlier, consistency, which doesn't add to anybody's work. It just might be a little bit of changing. And I think that would go a long way with some of the low-hanging fruit, at least, which it's funny. It's, nothing bad's going to happen if somebody can't find the lunch menu, but boy, can it cause frustration. And so I think there is, again, a lot of willingness of people to realize that all roads do not lead to Adele, and they have responsibilities, and I think there's a great opportunity there.
Member Banks?
Thank you. As I read the audit a few days ago, one thing stood out for me, and that was how in the world can somebody do all of this work, just one person, and accomplish such incredible every single time. And so it was glaring to me that was something that we as a board, I know I personally thank Adele for her exemplary leadership and professionalism, and she gets the job done, but the capacity is an issue, and I clearly see that. Thank you.
I will just say it baffles me too. And I used to do her job in a much smaller district.
Member Sadowski?
Yeah, I would echo Member Banks' sentiments. We really appreciate all you do, Adele. And I really liked the idea of exploring an intern, and I'm glad you're thinking about that. And I look forward to learning more about that if you decide to explore that route. I know that we're blessed to have a lot of good colleges here in town, and so I think there's some opportunities for that. I guess one question that I had when we're thinking about how communication is not just, Adele's responsibility, but it's everyone's responsibility. As a school board member, I really appreciate Adele's presence on social media, or our district presence on the social media, and I try to share as many of those things as I can, but beyond that, do you have any ideas for how school board members can contribute?
I'm going to say that I would imagine, in the little time I've spent focusing on the district and these few days in the district, the ideas that come to mind, I'm sure you're all already doing. First of all, I appreciate having sat in on many school board meetings in many districts, in many places. I appreciate how often you all reference, for the community's sake, can we explain this? Which I think is great. The flip side of that is, even though I understand you have some impressive numbers of people who watch these recordings, it's still really such a small segment. And so, but it's the best you can do with, when an afternoon or evening meeting occurs, and that's where so many important decisions are made. I have no doubt that you are all out in the community and going on field trips, and there are just, speaking to the issues, listening to constituents, and again, spreading those positive stories. So I don't know that there is more that board members can do. Sure, yes. And I think just continuing to support, which again, when I mentioned district leadership seeking out this audit, obviously it had to come with the board's approval. And I think that's a great starting point. When a district, and when I spoke to the cabinet yesterday, I was asked, is it districts really in deep trouble who know they're just disastrous? Is that when they ask for an audit? And it honestly is most of the time either when there's change or just an acknowledgement of, we think we know what we're doing well, we know there's gaps, and we just want to make sure it's not based on assumptions, but based on reality, not just our own opinions, but those of the people that we're trying to serve. So again, I think in the board's role, aside from, you could really get going on planting that money tree. But besides that, I think continuing to just support and recognize the importance of communication is a huge step forward.
Member Lofold?
Well, and that just rolls right into the question I was going to offer, or the observation that what I just find the audit so incredibly beneficial for all of us, and and the district's decision, our decision to go forward with it, knowing that I'm not going to say that every one of these weaknesses I probably have seen in my 9 years on the board, but I think we've all understood that one person in a communication department, or we've added a community engagement position, but we're not having that going forward. But we've tried to add a little bit. But just the articulation that the surveys and your review here, and I don't know if we're going to get that paper that you're reading out of, because you've succinctly. No, her
My
notes.
notes, I will absolutely share them with
Kind
Adele.
of succinctly highlighted everything that is in here, but much more condensed and willing to, kind of help articulate us as well. But I just really appreciate the detail, and then the presentation that you give that's so passionately and sincerely share with us, knowing that we're trying, but yet there's, you're a specialist in this, and you want to share where we can grow and where we need to, consider our things. So I appreciate that. But just the articulation and the depth of this is incredible. I wasn't when I visioned what an audit looked like in a communication area, I didn't know we'd go this deep. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Superintendent Magus?
Sure, and I just want to say thanks to you for the depth of the audit as well, but also for the partnership that we have with NSPRA and MINSPRA. I think both organizations are just a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of resources for us to work together. I remember when Adele first started, there's a partnership cohort where you work with the communications person and the superintendent, and you partner and go through different segments together. I think in some ways, I was so new, and it was COVID times, and you were so new. I think maybe considering what that reinvestment in time looks like too, just because, again, it has to be that deep partnership with upper administration and the community. I look at a big segment of my job needs to be being a communicator and a communications-focused person. So very appreciative of those resources that MINSPRA and NSPRA provide, and look forward to deeper partnership and deeper use of those resources as well. And we'll continue to keep the board informed as we think about what that strategic plan looks like, and also our exploration of additional resources, whether it would be a stipended internship or other things along those lines.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, board, we have in front of you the summary report that was provided. As you know, there was a finding by MDE related to our area Learning Center, our ALC. We have been working diligently as a team to address the things that were identified as things that were deficient. Director Larva has been leading a committee, with myself included, on addressing the things that were identified, again, for correction by MDE. You have that in front of you. I'll just quickly show it up on the screen for the community because we will not go through it because it's not a presentation, but we just wanted to provide the board and the community with ongoing updates on how we are progressing with the addressing the deficiencies. So what you see on the screen here is just, again, a pie chart that just shows, the things that we have in place. There are 20 action items and just shows the number of things that we have in progress right now, things that have not been started, and the things that have been completed. If we scroll to the next page. So it will identify the areas. As you see, one of the very first things is the 4-day week without having approval. It shows exactly the corrective action step, the evidence, the timeline, the parties responsible, the status, which means that we are in progress, and some of the summary notes. So just want to point out how to read this and follow this report, and we will take questions if the board has questions. Member Sadowski?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I know I'd asked you this prior to the meeting, just wanted to make sure the board was aware of this too, on where we see the finding, the 4-day week without approval, we have gotten that. It says that we receive an email, and we have gotten that email, so just wanted to
The
make sure
conditional
that the board
approval that
knew.
we received related to the 4-day.
Yeah.
Can you just speak to that quickly?
You're asking if we have received their approval?
No, I'm stating to the board that that I'm letting you know that we have received that, because that's what I asked Assistant Superintendent.
Conditional waiver.
My understanding is we don't officially have the approval until we get the letter sent to John at 45 days from the commissioner. But we've been assured that they're approving these provisional for ALCs, but we haven't gotten the actual official letter from the
Okay,
commissioner yet.
got it.
So just being clear
Just
about
wanted to
that.
clarify that.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
That's just for a 1-year extension.
Correct.
We did meet with that person from the Flexible Learning Department, and if we were going to pursue a 4-day beyond the one provisional year, it is the full process that needs to occur with public meetings and all the things that are embedded in that application. We did not have to do all of that for this 1-year provisional.
How long do you think that process would take?
Next year.
1 year? Okay,
There's a lot of engagement that is needed.
thank you.
Lawford?
Is there a discussion about whether or not we even want to seek that? At some point, if it's an in-depth process, where is that with teacher contract? Where is that with anything? And where do we discuss that as a board as to whether or not we even want to pursue that kind of opportunity, and where the data is that shows us that it's effective?
Yep. Throughout the school year, we will be providing additional status updates as well as having explicit meetings related to program improvements or options related to the plan. So there will be additional full-blown presentations related to program changes or potential program changes. So the board will have a chance to weigh in on whether we pursue something.
I just know that puts a lot of added work on our directors, on the people sitting at this table. And if you determine early enough that it's something we don't want to pursue, then wouldn't it save you some time? Or do you think it's really worth the input of your work next year to pursue the process to see if it will work?
I'll let Director.
Or do you discuss that now and say, we've got a lot on our plate? We've got, can we go back to a five-day ALC, ALP program? Or is that commitment so strongly thought of that, we need to do the work you're saying you're going to do next year to see, but to do all of the work next year that it will take, and then proceed through the process of a year of getting that set, just seems like, do we want to have that conversation early enough and potentially not go down there? Just putting it out there, being honest, open book.
And I agree that those are some conversations that need to be had. We do have contract negotiations that'll be starting next
Spring.
spring with the DFT. It is something that is in contract, so I just wanted to point that out as well.
Chair Derek Eater.
I just want to make sure as we go through this process, this is our opportunity to look at our structures, make sure that we're serving our kids best. So that's really, as you're going through this, I hope that those are conversations that you're having as well. Like as we say all the time, our legacy practices serving the kids sitting in this building at this time. So I hope that those are happening, and I'll speak, I'll be brave enough or vain enough to speak for the board and just say, I think that you would have our support in having those conversations around what is actually best for kids. And I understand that we have contract negotiations coming up that I'm sure we all look forward to, but that shouldn't be the limiting factor as to what's best for those kids in that building. So just want to make sure that you all are thinking with that as well.
We are, and so that's exactly how we have approached the partnership and conversation with the committee, which includes district leadership as well as curriculum leaders and staff from our AOC, AEO, and even our secondary principals are involved in the conversations on what the programming should look like and reimagine potentially for AOC, and I always throw in AEO because there's some connection. So we are engaging in that conversation on trying to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the students and reconsidering legacy practices and putting in place the things that we believe will be more beneficial for students. So we are engaging in those conversations, and there will be, again, more opportunities for the board to hear about these potential plans and ideas and seeking board approval.
Jen, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, so I think there have been some learnings that have happened in the last, oh gosh, how long have I been working on this now? Since end of April. Some things that we've learned. We were given clear directions on how to change our system, our Infinite Campus and our MARS system. We have to have a whole new org code. I wasn't aware that all of those things were going to happen until we got guidance from MDE. Initially, there was a lot of conversation about like, well, let's just get our ALC status back right away. But with some of those kinds of changes, those are changes that are systemic, that we probably aren't going to be able to offer an ALC opportunity till like this time next year when we're starting summer school. We'll work on the application, but we're getting time to work on the application. So I think just some of the things that we learn as we kind of go, it leads us to say, really is our opportunity. It really is our opportunity to think about what we would like to offer students in the future, and how we want to build with students at the center. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what has changed since the last time I sat in front of you, and I'm not going to really go for all of these, but what I thought might be helpful for you, because you did ask the question, how are you going to be updated about the process that we're making? And you saw the dashboard last time, and I'm happy to say 2 things are completed now versus just 1. There's a lot of things that are in progress, and there's some things that still aren't started, but those are kind of things that are down the line. But what I did do is I added the notes column, thinking that could be helpful for you. So what I will do every month is just kind of take a look at the notes, and if there's things to add, I might add them, or I might like wipe out the note and put something new in there. So that's going to be where you're going to see the changes in the color of the status, and then you'll see notes coming from me. I just thought that might be helpful for you as we go through this.
Member Sadowski and then Superintendent Magus.
The notes are really helpful, and I guess one suggestion I would have with that is maybe just keep these and put the date in, and then add the next. I would really appreciate that, because then otherwise I'm going to pull this out and keep it in a binder and be flipping.
I can do
which
that
is
for you,
fine.
yeah.
So, and I know it might get a little long, and then we can maybe have a follow-up, think if that's a good idea, but it might be nice to have those dates. And then I was actually going to, before you even said it, is just, looking at all of the findings that are in progress, and I see a lot of summer this summer, and I see a lot of fall. And so those are going to be ones that we'll keep an eye on, and we'll look forward to updates. So I appreciate the kind of estimated timeline. Is that when you're going to be working on them, or when you anticipate them being accomplished?
So some of them might say by a certain time frame, you might see that. Some of it is the timeline of, that might be when we're getting really into working them or establishing them. And some of these timelines, we're initially thinking that we were trying to get this done in a quicker time frame too. So I don't want to sit back on my heels too much either, but I also, some of it might need to be readjusted for timelines as we dive into the work.
And I think that's where the notes will be really helpful, so thank you.
Yeah.
I just was some of this has already been summarized, but I think in general, just to point out our philosophy, I think when we first had these citations and findings, there was a significant sense of urgency, of course, because when something like this happens, we want to jump in and fix it right away and as quickly as possible. Yet at the same time, we were learning that there were larger systemic issues that we really want to address holistically. And so taking a little bit of time to do things right is really where we're coming from. We want to make sure that we're not just putting Band-Aids on things, that we're really going deep and reimagining and re-envisioning what people want. And I would also say that the staff of the ALC and AEO have found this to be, even though it's somewhat painful, it's also been a good opportunity to really think about how can we do this even better? How can we take things from good to great? And they've also expressed significant appreciation, not just for Sue Lena and Jody Geisler and others who have provided support down there, but especially for Director Larva and the support that she's provided. And I think that I actually would say that as you know, we've had sometimes some of the conversations and relationships sometimes have been a little strained just from things you hear through listening session and other places. But I would actually say that some of the work we're doing is actually, I would say, reparative of the trust and the culture between the district and the site. And I'm very proud of our teachers there. I'm very proud of our other staff there. And they have good hearts, and they're trying to do good for kids. And I'm appreciative of them. And I think sometimes they feel maybe that they're being blamed or that they did something wrong. But I think it's important to recognize that they're very good-hearted people who are working for some of our students with the greatest need. And we just want to all work together to improve things. And it's going to take a little bit of time. It's not going to.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I've actually really valued my time being spent down there. I'm pretty much, well, now that school's out, I'm not going to be down there every single day, but I was pretty much spending my mornings trying to do district work up here and spending time with them down there. And I think they're appreciating is seeing the district perspective as well in all of this. Like I've had lots of after school meetings, like after kids are gone, kind of meetings with staff, and just really trying to listen to them and then also share a different perspective sometimes. And I feel like it's just been a good partnership this last, 6 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, 7 weeks.
Member Lofold?
So just a couple of things too. Just one would be, because this document is on board book and it's open to public and we want to be transparent, maybe we could put a little abbreviation key, like IS is independent study, I'm assuming, and, you know, just some clarification so that if there are community members, parents that have students here, or just other staff that are also very, you know, interested in wanting to support, and so they know some of that. There's not many, but
Oh,
that would be
there's quite a
okay.
bit when you dig in, but yeah.
And I'm assuming that the direct, when it says responsible party director is you, right? Okay, okay. Just kind of clarifying that as well. And the IC coordinator, what is IC?
Infinite Campus
Oh, Infinite
Coordinator.
Campus, okay. I think I thought about that
Yep.
when I first
I
looked
just
at it.
didn't put names in there. I could have,
No,
but I
you don't
put
have to.
titles
No,
in
no.
just in case somebody were to move on. We seem to have people that leave in
Yep,
spring.
yep. And the CLPs, you've got the template going, but that actually won't you be able to say it is finished when school starts and they're in the process of getting CLPs for every student that's enrolled? And is that just in our seat-based ALP?
No, that's for all of our programming, and that's why it's still in progress. We have targeted services, and but we can no longer have targeted services if we're not an ALC. But we are contracting with Cloquet, as you know. So we have we still have there's a lot of different programs that have CLPs, and so cleaning them all up has been like a process. And by the start of the school year, all of our CLPs will be totally cleaned up. So that'll be good to have that completed. But there's school within a school CLPs, there's seat-based, there's when we have independent study, credit recovery would have a CLP. So there's a lot of those pieces for that. So I'm trying to say, like, let's not have a million different CLPs. Let's have an overarching CLP, and then you can indicate which one it pertains to. So really what I want to see is an elementary one for when we do targeted services, a middle level one, and a high school one is really what I would like to see as big umbrellas with the different programming options underneath each of them.
And would a CLP last their time in the school, or does it have to be renewed every year?
So we have to treat them like they're a 504 plan or an IEP, so they have to be addressed annually, and they have to have progress reports at least annually.
But needed, because it's the continuous learning plan, so it just talks about their annual goals that students are mapping out. So if students are working on completing a credit recovery class or taking a class of interest, you know, they're just identifying what classes they are thinking about taking, and maybe even if they have a goal of improving their attendance, that could be one of their goals that they establish as well. So it's very similar to an individualized educational plan for students.
Can I ask a follow-up? Do we see, especially when I look at CLPs and maybe the need for more staff, either more staff, more counselor, or I don't know who does the CLP, but I'm just not related to that, but just overall, as we venture to next fall and maybe the next year, do we anticipate our staffing to stay strong and present, or is that fluctuating because of different, we're operating as an ALP instead of an ALC, or are we strong there?
So I'm still working on the schedule. That's in process. I would like to say that, you know, when there are opportunities to examine what we're doing, I am going to make some decisions around that. But we do still have needs for the online with AEO, for seat-based, and we're trying to figure out what we're going to anticipate for that. Credit recovery is going to be where we're living in next year versus having independent study. What has happened over the course of time is that we haven't had as much outreach for credit recovery. And when I say outreach, I'm talking about having staff assigned to go to Denfeld or to go to East and support students that are maybe in the credit recovery programs at the sites. And so we're going to bring that back next year using our current staffing that we have instead of like reducing staffing, I feel like it's important for us to do that outreach piece to try to give as much support as we can in the current model that we are going to be operating under.
I appreciate that. It's probably not a topic that's well, that we've vetted everything out, but I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you, Director
Any other
Oliver.
questions?
Next up, we have our very own Executive Director Extraordinaire, Simone Zunich. It is.
Perhaps. Perhaps. We can.
It's a little I know, isn't that pretty? Let's all think about that. While I talk about the budget, walking along that path. Okay, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm Simone Zunich. I'm the Executive Director of Business Services, Finance, and Operations. I'm presenting to you the third proposed budget. I've already done this twice the last 2 months through the Committee of the Whole. I have attached those links into the document that's in Board Book as well. Honestly, nothing's really changed since the second reading. So I have expanded it to look like our final product. It will go to the school board next week for adoption. We did submit the resolution for the adoption last night at HR Business Services, so thank you. And I will go through the details now. At the very end, I'm going to jump there real fast. With the superintendent's approval, I did add the 26th legislative session update. I kind of like to read that stuff too, and that's just for you to look at and see if it can answer any questions for you. So, starting with the first page. No, for page 1, the other way. You're there, thank you. We just have defined, as I do every year, that the general fund is Fund 1, transportation is Fund 3, our operating capital is Fund 5. These 3 funds are our general fund, okay? Our additional funds are food service, Fund 2, community service is Fund 4, construction is Fund 6, debt service is Fund 7, our trust fund, and internal service fund, which is dental. Our trust fund is an internal fund. I think coming up after we start with our new auditors, who will be here already this month, which is super exciting, L.B. Carlson, I'll be having some more further conversations about Fund 8, which was established back in 2000, year 2000, right, Sheila? And we've been putting money into that fund every year to basically pay for severances for staff that are connected to federal funds, okay? And then our internal service fund is our dental fund. So the process for general fund revenue budgeting will include projecting and analyzing current federal, state, local revenues, along with forecasting legislative or local district changes to revenues. I do use the what-if revenue projection model from MDE, and in it has a lot of information, but you can kind of play with what you think your ADMs are, and then it does do all your calculations for you. So it's a wonderful process, and that is stored, of course, in our iDrive, and that supports how we do, get to our budget numbers. So for 27, I'm going to put this on there, even though we are below that. The district will continue to strive to meet our 8% district policy of the general fund. This will be supported by district-wide operational budget realignments and reductions. I'm going to say that is something that we will need to look at every year. Our local levy, we had an increase of 13.75%, which is $2,359,004.47. Our state aid increase, we had a formula increase of 2.69%. And I will tell all of you, that is all the money we received in revenue. So our levy went up by 2.3 million. Our state aid is going to increase by 2.7 million. Feel free to ask me any questions. I like to have a comfortable give and take dialogue. I like doing that. Our American Indian Education Aid right now for this year is $413,000. We have not received our FY27 amount yet. That's to be determined by MDE. Our literacy incentive aid for next year is $388,659. I know the title director has done a presentation, but there is a 14% decrease over FY26. So total title will be roughly 2.7 million. MTSS grant, there is no grant money for FY27. We did get money last year. Our ADSES state funding, which is 55% reimbursed of expenditures, is approximately for FY27, $581,245.37. Our paraprofessional training dollars we get is a little over $65,000. Now that hourly worker unemployment dollar amount, $670,000, that's a big number, but that number has increased for the district. The first 2 years, our numbers for summer unemployment, so that is July, August, and September, was under $100,000. I think a lot of districts, we all assumed it would be this high number like this, but by the third summer, that is the number that we recognized last summer in unemployment. So there are funds still for another year or two to reimburse us for those dollars. Okay.
Director Zunich, is that?
Yes.
We get full reimbursement for that as of right now?
Yes, but it's just summer employment, so that would be just July, August, and September. If someone chooses to take unemployment during the year, it does not qualify. These are mostly our hourly workers, drivers, paraprofessionals, our food nutrition workers. Okay?
I just want to point out just a couple of things, and we talk about those federal fund changes, and I think that's important to note. We oftentimes talk about the state budget and how that impacts us, and we don't often focus as much on the federal budget but with those federal cuts in programming, it's made it difficult because in the past, when we had more money, we were able to fund and fill in those gaps. And then a piece of good news, bad news. The bad news is that we didn't get the MTS grant for this year, or this coming year. But the good news, if you call it good news, it's because the state looks at us as actually being an exemplar with what we're doing with MTSS. So because we're doing so well with MTS now, they don't want to give us more money to keep working to improve it. So I think that in some ways it's good kudos for the team, but unfortunate that it results in having less money for MTSS.
And as a reminder, ADSES means Alternative Delivery of Specialized Instructional Services. So that is one of the resources we receive to support students in hopes that they can avoid being identified as needing special education. So we use those funds to support intervention positions, either reading or math interventionists, as well as other positions that can be funded using those resources. The special education team did a presentation last month regarding how those funds can be used. And again, some of them can be interventions, but there's other positions that can be funded with ADSES. Member Sadowski?
I just wanted to thank you, Director Zunich, for just keeping us so well informed every month, every time we have a budget update in our HR meetings one-on-one. And I just really wanted to highlight how much I appreciate you really looking at each fund and looking for the most creative ways possible to kind of get us through this bumpy financial situation. And I'm glad that we're trying to prioritize keeping our reserve as well. I think that's a very smart thing to do. We're always gonna, hopefully we won't always have cuts, but we've seen the projections, so we see that for a couple years here, we're gonna be having cuts, and I think it's important to have that. Thank you.
Member Banks?
Thank you very much. I'm looking at the bullets here, and will you be talking tonight about the integration specialist line item, what that budget looks like, or is that not a part of this?
I will be addressing the achievement and integration budget,
Okay,
okay? Yes, so
All right.
it's attached here.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
I just spoke too soon, okay.
No, you're good, thank you. So if you go to, here you go. So FY27 pupil counts, I'm using, I know the board supports a conservative ADM report or support of 8,175. I increased it over 50, which we used 8,125 for FY26. Right now, our enrollment report last night showed 8,036, but this is the dip, it comes down and it will come back up. By December, we'll have a final count. We are confident that we will get to that number. But it's best, I think, for planning to use a conservative number. Food and nutrition, free breakfast and lunch for all students will continue in FY27. The application for educational benefits, it's also known as the free and reduced meal form, are mostly direct certified. Applications are still required. Now, here's the hard news that I just received last week. This is one change from the last committee of the whole. There is a permanent decrease in state funding beginning July 1 of 26 of 6 cents per meal. So we will be getting 6 cents less reimbursed in revenue for meals. I just got that information from the Food and Nutrition Department, so I want everyone to be aware of that. So you'll see when I did the Fund 2, there is a negative 82,000 that I'm saying the budget will land. There is a healthy fund balance for Fund 2, so we should be able to support that.
Member Sadowski?
I'm glad to hear we might be able to support that. I'm appalled at this cut. Given when we all go to the grocery store, we're seeing the big increases, and we know from in our media, and we see more and more people depending on food shelves, and it's making it harder for families, and this is going to be hard for us too. This is disappointing.
It is. So the district will provide the free breakfast and lunch, but we will be reimbursed at 6 cents less a meal. And right now, it looks like they should be free again through 28. We'll see what happens after that. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that and bring that to your attention so it's not a surprise.
Member Lowfold?
Can I just editorialize off
Of
of
course.
Member Zadowski's, is that this is appalling for that reason, but also appalling that this was a mandated state mandate for us. And I understand that. We want, we all heard the strong desire of our state and our leaders of senators and representatives supporting free lunch for our whole, but then now to say that they're going to decrease what they're going to reimburse us for is, I feel, injustice and a back down of their promise and the vote that they took. And I'm sure my colleagues that supported this at the state, are also not happy. Am I on my right line of understanding that this was done? Was this done by federal or state?
It's state.
Okay.
It's state.
Okay.
So.
Don't understand.
Yeah, I don't understand. Not only are we going to see that decrease there, but we as a district have actually seen an increase because of our direct certification. Our team has done an amazing job, and there are some districts that have less compensatory aid because of these, the direct certification. So we have seen an increase there. But not only is that happening, Sheila Oak, Food and Nutrition Coordinator Sheila Oak is telling me that supplies are between 11 and 12% higher than last year as well. So all that math is coming to us. Again, we have a very healthy fund balance for Fund 2, and we have to try not to use it, but that's what it's there for.
Member Sadowski?
I'm sorry, I just had one last thought on the food nutrition, just reminding us, and we all know this in our community, but we saw a huge increase in students who are accessing our school lunches after these lunches were made free. And now and so it's just a really important resource. I just wanted to point that out, that there was a lot of families and a lot of students who were falling through the cracks in the middle, and they didn't qualify for free lunch or reduced lunch, and now they're accessing that, and we have that clear data that was pretty black and white there, and so it just makes us even more disappointing. I really appreciate the work of Sheila Oak and the team for really stretching our dollars as far as we can make them, and thank you.
Thank you. We have seen increased lines at our sites, so it is definitely a very important project for our students to have free meals, breakfast and lunch. So I have just a little bit more housekeeping here. Other local revenues are estimated by prior year fundings. That's just a basic budgeting 101. You take what you did last year and you can use a multiplier of 2% or 5%, however it's trending. Our local revenue includes property tax levy, miscellaneous tax revenues, county apportionment, tuition, fees, admissions, medical assistant, interest earnings, rent, gifts, and bequests. Insurance recovery, that's when a car drives into your school, that's your insurance recovery. Sale of materials and equipment, and other miscellaneous revenues. State revenue includes payments by the Department of Education and other state agencies, and federal revenue includes aids awarded through state agencies or directly from federal sources. Restricted revenues require a reserved fund balance if funding is not all spent in the allocated fiscal year. Most restricted revenues are intended to be spent in full in the allocated fiscal year. Restricted reserved revenues come from state and local sources, aid and levy. And I'm really emphasizing that paragraph, which is there every year. We will definitely, this year for this audit, are going to be, using our restricted funds we have some nice balances. We're going to be using those this year. So it's an important part of your audit. You're always supposed to use your restricted funds first. And then that helps offset your general fund. Do you have any questions for me? Okay. Undesignated revenues come from federal, state, and local sources, the largest of which is the basic formula allowance, the general education aid. Undesignated revenues may have individual calculations but do not have a required reserved fund balance. Federal sources are often reimbursements and have allowable carryover provisions to subsequent fiscal years. Use of federal funds has limitations. So we have federal funds in special education. There are some in food and nutrition. We have title. Can't think of anything else. I think that's it. So let's go to our next page, our timeline. I just wanted to, let the community know that starting in January and February of this year, we did have individual board member meetings occurred to review the 5-year forecast and preliminary budget. It says individual, but that really should read small group meetings. April 7th, we did a committee of the whole, the first reading. I provided the link there. May 5th was the second one. Last night was the 8th, where we presented the resolution, and tonight we're speaking, and then the board adoption is next week. Now, for projected enrollment, as I said, we were at 8175. I worked with our MARS coordinator on this information. We did this analysis in May of '26. Really, this is what hinges all of our funding. So I like to have a, a grid here for you. Due to the 25 final counts of 8,255.88, we are going to use the ADM count of 8175 for the 27 budget planning. We have below attached some actuals and some estimations for you. Again, this year will not get finalized till December of '26 for the FY26 school year. We will, based off of that number, we'll receive our final 10% of any aid that we should have gotten this year. We get 90% before June, and the other 10% comes in December or January after your audit's done. So then we have what we call receivables. So you're always working in a couple of years. We know our special education aid is 2 years behind, even when they, when the department gets a letter of, what, memorandum, I can't even think of the word right now. What's the word I'm thinking about, Jason? Thank you. Yes, so that is based on FY25. So we're always 2 years behind in getting our money, so. Okay, next page, revenue budget summary. I put some categorical aids here for you. Undesignated is our general fund of 68 million. Federal programs, I did reduce by roughly a little over $1 million from last year. However, we did just get notification that Head Start will get a cost of living increase of 6 cents. So I mean, it's better than nothing. Yes. Special education, I changed this up for you. Last year, I used to do just the basic amount we're supposed to get, but we did get now finally an updated number, including some subsidy numbers. So our special education aid is 32 million. Transportation, we should be getting in 4.8 million. Telecom access, that is 140,000. That has to do with our technology. We get the same amount every year. American Indian, I put the FY26 number in there because I do not know yet what FY27 will be. Medical assistance, last year we used the number of 1.8 million. I'm being brave and putting 1.2 million here that we hopefully can get in revenue. I've put the illiteracy incentive aid there. Down below, our restricted reserve. Staff development is calculated at 2% of our general aid, so that number is a given to us, the 1.3 million. The operating capital, 1.9 million. And our basic skills and comp ed. So that number there could change, but right now, as I look today, the number has not changed in our what-if revenue. There are many, many districts in the state that have lost money in compensatory, but we're going to, I think, be some winners here. So that number has increased over last year. Not a lot, but it did go up.
To that point, that has been kind of a controversial issue and an issue of advocacy of other districts right now, because there are a lot of other districts that are losing out in that readjustment of comp ed. Pretty serious issue for some districts, but just again, to reiterate for the board what you just said, that we came out a little bit ahead on this one.
Our gifted and talented for next year will be 115,000. That is not a large number, but it's an important department, but we don't really get a lot of aid there. Our learning and development is 1.9 million. Now, here I put the ALC, so it's still referred to that at MDE, so I stayed with that number, and that is the FY26 calculator right there. So I put that there for you so you have some context to it. And achievement and integration, to Member Banks' question, will be 1.6 million. Safe Schools levy is 330,000, and that is where we pay our SRO officers out of. That is that fund right there. So those are your categorical aids. Wanted to give those breakdowns to you. That has come up at various QLT meeting. You know, people have wanted to know what these numbers are. So we can always refer to them to this document. Thank you. Okay, so here is the big picture. Fund 1, our revenue is on the left and our expenditures are on the right. So Fund 1, there's a dollar difference of $3,856,765. I put to the far right there for you. Here is where we are making, we're doing our budget reduction work. I put 4.2 million. That is, you know, that's just your estimate because we don't know exactly the benefits for every person, but we use an average number. And it's important for the district to have a little buffer there too, because the superintendent, assistant superintendent may need to, you know, take care of some issues. As you can see, Fund 2, food service, is minus $82,605. Here's where I calculated that we could run into a deficit there, but again, we have a healthy fund balance there. Community service is to the good of $127,661. Again, we have a strong fund balance in Fund 4, community service. Fund 6 is our construction. We don't have any new construction. When we were building this building here, that's where we put those numbers in. Fund 7 is our debt service. That $459,955 potentially is some interest that that money will earn. Here's our Fund 8 insurance, $19,158 change. We're anticipating for our dental of a difference of $108,702. Our student activity account is technically part of Fund 1, but we recognize it as a separate fund. So when you see all the pie charts down below, the pie charts do not include the Fund 79 number, so there's roughly a difference of the $500,000, but you'll see that as we go down. So the overall revenues is $532,933, and our expenditures are at $202,000. So there's an overall difference of $3,300,000, but really the fund that we mostly focus on is Fund 1.
Sure. You mentioned some of the budget reduction and reallocation work that we've been doing, and not to go deep into everything, but just to reiterate for the board, and since this was new since our last public meetings, we were able to add back some of our social worker and interventionists at the elementary level, and that was funded in part by, there was a principal on special assignment position. As we know now, Danette Sebo is taking a position out of district to rejoin family in the Madison area. And so that principal on special assignment position, we're going to be making some shifts there, creating a TOSA position instead, and then shifting money out of the literacy lead TOSA position. So basically the net wash is that we're saving the full amount for a principal on special assignment salary and benefits, which we're putting into those social worker and interventionist positions. We also, because those positions went back to their original schools, there were some schools that were impacted more than others, and we did make sure that we reallocated a little more for Lowell, Lowell had been hit pretty hard with some reductions. So that was where we made some shifts.
Okay, thank you. So now we have all the wonderful pie charts. I won't go through each one of them. The only one I do want to highlight is the first one. These are wonderful graphics that we do get from Forecast Analytics. But down below, Shannon, if you just push a little bit further, so you can see where we have the historical revenues, expenses, and fund balances. So I just want the district, the school board to, let's keep an eye on that fund balance. It's that green line. okay? Shannon, would you go one more, please? And the second one here is just Fund 1, and I want us to pay attention to that green line as well. So, okay? And I did one of these for every fund, and then I also did, Shannon, would you keep going through until you see a document that looks like, there you go, that one right there. This is also a wonderful document. It breaks it down by fund, by federal, local revenue, state revenue, and federal. And if you'd page down a little bit further, please. It shows you where we are expecting our revenue for each grouping there. And then it provides a nice little commentary at the bottom there. So I'll just read this one and I won't do all the others, but the 27 revenue budget insight. The revenue for 27 is budgeted at 199 million, as we read on the first page, which is a difference of 12,000,009 or 6.95% over last year. So we know why. The levy, we're getting more levy money than we did the year before. We're seeing the 2.69% in our basic formula. So our local revenue is budgeted to change by 5 million to 53,409,919. Our state revenue is budgeted to change by 8,000,001, and our federal revenue is budgeted to change by a negative 217,000. So I wanted to point that one out to you. As we know, our title, federal title, is reducing. So I did the math. Sorry.
Do you mind pausing for a second? Can you go scroll up to the top of that page just so we can find it in the paper copy?
Sorry. It's revenue, our budget summary revenue.
Page 10.
Okay, thank you. There are a lot of documents. I had to go over it 4 times to make sure I had them all. So these documents are great. And Shannon, would you go one more, please? So there's a revenue and expense document for every fund. This document shows what our salaries and benefits will be, our purchase services, and our supplies and equipment. You'll see salaries and benefits went up. Well, that is contract language, right? That's salaries going up per contract. We know our health insurance is increasing by 15%. We will be bringing to you in July a presentation from our insurance company. We're anticipating 5 to 10% in parts of the insurance, but it could be up to 15% increase. So that's why that benefit shows higher. Supplies and equipment, we tried to keep that flat, but we did increase. We know supplies are going to cost more money, and our fuel is going up as well. So there's a really great breakdown for the last 2 years, and for the current year, there's a percent change and a dollar change. And there's also some narrative there. So I hope we can answer every question for you. If not, just let me know, and I'd be happy to answer anything. Thanks, Jason, for the maintenance of effort. I lost it right there a minute. I couldn't think of it.
Superintendent Magus.
Sure. I just want to say thanks to Simone and her team, as well as everybody who's been involved in the budgeting process. It has not been easy, and I appreciate, too, the board's work that we've done to make sure that we're engaging in deep conversation. I think trying to make sure that we heard a lot about communication, too, and making sure that people understand the why of what we're doing and how we're working on these things. I think another thing to consider is unfortunately, the impact that we have not just this year, but for years to come. And we have also been considering what we might consider for potential referendum or operational levy for the fall. And one thing that the board has asked about is making sure that we have some community input and community feedback. And so I've been working with Adele really closely and working on an adaptive survey that we would be looking at launching in the next week or so that would have postcards that would go to the community, so that we would also be working with the community to gauge community interest in supporting these situations. We also shot a video today, basically just talking about our current situation, what things are looking like for the coming years, that I can share with the board as well prior to sending it out, just because we're, like many districts, and I know people get sick of hearing it, but like many districts around the state, we're having very similar funding issues, and we're making very similar proportionate reductions as almost every other district in the state. But those reductions are going to continue, not just this year, but into the future. And even if we pass a successful referendum in the fall, those monies will not be available for next year. We would still have reductions next year again. It would be the year after that we would stop. But I think it's important for us to fully engage the community before we make those determinations, before the board makes the determinations, and we would have that information for I know we talked about having a board work session in July. I think we talked about potentially July 9th was one of the dates, and so that was a time that we thought about making sure that we have the survey information back so that we can consider community input on that, because when we engage our staff, they're concerned about what this means, and they want to know what is our plan other than just make reductions. And so I think gauging community appetite for whether or not they can continue to support schools, because our state advocacy and federal advocacy hasn't resulted in more resources for us at this point.
Member Sadowski?
I think it's great you pointed that out again. I think it can bear repeating every time we talk about this, because we're operating in a broken system. It's just the way our public schools are funded is systemically broken, and we see more cuts, 0.6 to each meal. And so I think that bears repeating, so it's unfortunate.
Chair Derek Eater.
And just to Member Sadowski's point, education is a people-heavy business. It's just you can't educate kids without having people there. So when you look at that, this number always astounds me. Between our salary and our benefits, it's $148 million, and our total revenues are going to be $199 million. So when you have to make meaningful cuts, the only place, one of the few places you have is in people, because we're 80 to 85% of our budget is people. So that's just the reality of the system that we are in. Pure student funding, individual student funding that comes from the state and the federal government does not take into account when we have an 8.51% increase in our salary and benefits to a tune of almost $12 million from last year to this year. So if you think of what that growth has looked like in our benefits over the last 3 years, salary and benefits, these are just going to rates that are making it nearly impossible for us to have a balanced budget without making significant and deep cuts. And we are put in the position that the only place we can make significant cuts is when it comes to people. So we are caught in a loop that is very difficult to get out of, because education is people heavy, because it has to be. So I just want to point that out. And we, as the Duluth Public Schools, operate this no differently than anybody else. We have revenue that comes in from the state, the federal, and the local government, and we have expenditures that go out. And the only way we have two choices. We can increase our revenue, or we can cut our expenditures. And the cycle that we're in right now is to cut, because we see no increase meaningfully in our revenue, especially when we think about inflationary pressures, labor costs, all of the things. So that's what we operate a budget here no differently than any business operates a budget. We have to stay within our means, and unless we can raise revenue, we're going to have to make cuts. It's just as simple as that.
The organizing thing about that is we know our teachers deserve to get paid even more than they're getting paid. They deserve to keep these really good benefits. It's really, really unfortunate. I would also, just kind of changing the subject a little bit, but same topic, is just thank you to my school board colleagues for going down and lobbying down at the state over the last year. I know that some of you have a little more capacity than I did. I went at least once, but I know some of you are retired or maybe just have a little more flexibility, so I really appreciate that. I know that we didn't maybe get the outcomes that we wanted, but I know that we worked hard to do that. And we also thank you to Superintendent Magus and Assistant Superintendent Bonds too for being a part of professional organizations so we can make sure that our legislative platform is aligned with other entities, whether it's the Minnesota Department of Education, whether it's MSBA, AMSD, just to make those asks stronger. We did try to strategize on that. But.
All right, seeing no additional green lights, thank you, Executive Director Zotage. Chair Dirk Eater and Board, I wanted to also let you know inside your folder you will see 2 resolutions, one for Denfeld High School, also one for East High School. It's related to the Minnesota State High School League. It's the annual membership renewal form. So I just want to make sure that you are aware that those are in your folders, and they will be coming to the school board meeting for as part of a resolution and approval.
We done?